Good morning and welcome to our December BCP Council Cabinet meeting. Welcome to everybody viewing online across our platforms. We're now just going to refer to the housekeeping document before we move into our formal agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Cabinet is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. And if accessing via Teams, always turn on the video function when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphone when speaking and please mute or turn off your microphone when you are not talking. If you are accessing via Teams and would like to speak on an item, please do so by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. For those in the room, we're not expecting a fire alarm. If it sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point along Bradley Road. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So we're moving to agenda item 1, which is apologies. I've got apologies from Councillor Karen Rampton, and Councillor Broadhead is joining us online as well. Okay, so then we'll move to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. I'll come to Richard Jones, who will have mention on that item.
Thank you, Leader. Just to confirm for the record that for item 13, provision of beach huts on your agenda, all Cabinet members have been granted a dispensation to fully participate and vote on that item under the provisions of the Localism Act. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Okay, are there any other declarations of interest colleagues would like to show? No, I'm not seeing that, so we will move to confirmation of minutes. We've had those shared, so I'm very happy to propose those, and I would look to Councillor Duff, who I believe is going to second that. Yeah, great, thank you. Any comments on? No, all those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Okay, now we've got agenda item 4, which is public issues. We've had really pleased to see 20 statements submitted by members of the public on this occasion, and I think we've also got a statement from a member as well. Perhaps what I'll do now is hand over to our Democratic Services to call the public in to speak on those items. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that the Cabinet members did receive also a question along with the public statements when these were circulated, but the question was not within the rules of the Constitution, as it didn't pertain to a item on the agenda for this meeting. So the first statement that we have received is from Mr. Bob Lister, the Chairman of Poole Beach Huts Association, and this will be read out by Mr. Alan Cook.
Good morning, and just press the microphone to start. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, all. My name is Alan Cook. I'm the chairman of the Friars Cliff Beach Hut Owners Association, and I am going to read statements from my own association, the Poole Beach Hut Association, and the Bournemouth Beach Hut Association, which is the one that was just mentioned by Bob Lister. I would say to the chair, if you wish to ask any questions of me about any of these statements, I'm more than prepared to answer them, but I realise I'm only here to read a statement, so that's down to you. Bournemouth Beach Hut Association. The Bournemouth Beach Hut Association strongly urges rejection of the proposal before Cabinet. To say we have been consulted and our views considered is a total misrepresentation. Councillors have failed to respond to our emails. Our costed alternative for 23-24 and suggestion of a year to find a fairer alternative has been ignored. Promised updates and reports have not been provided, so how is that consultation? We believe this is a blatant attempt to get the proposal agreed without scrutiny. Beach hut users are expected to fund unrelated expenditure as they are deemed to be affluent. Bournemouth Beach Hut Association. Second statement from Poole Beach Hut Association, Chairwoman Anne Gerard. We are disappointed that due process has not been followed. Councillors outside of the administration have been sidelined and not been given the opportunity to question these policies or proposals. In Poole, 42% increase over 5 years for beach hut tenants is totally unacceptable. The lack of service and facilities has deteriorated. Tenants asked to fund general seafront costs. Sadly, approximately 8,000 will vote to replace this Tory administration. The PFH mistakenly, that would be the portfolio holder, mistakenly wrote that taxpayers should not subsidise beach huts. Yet in Poole, £3.2 million per annum is received, and only £400,000 is ring-fenced, the balance to BCP for their services. Apology, Chair, I actually got those the wrong way around. The second one was from Bob Lister, the first one was from Anne Gerard. Then the statement from the Friars Cliff Beach Hut Association. This proposal before Cabinet is a clear attempt to subsidise all the seafront operations and bolster the MTFP by penalising beach hut tenants to the tune of an additional £10 million over the next 5 years. The tenants already pay rents of £7 million a year, which contributes £5 million to subsidise the seafront. The council sidelined our alternative proposal to uplift the rents by an inflationary 10%, which would then have given us a year to work on a sensitive and practical harmonisation plan. Cabinet should not endorse this proposal. It penalises local residents and will cause political damage to this administration. Those are the three statements, Chair.
Thank you very much for those. And
Thank you. The next statement is from Mr. Darren Pidwell, Chairman of the Mudderford to Sandbank Beach Hut Association, and this will be read out by Mr. Steve Barrett.
please press the button. It would red light will show. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Mudderford Sandbank Beach Hut Association, I would like to submit the following statement. Despite the fact that we presented an equitable alternative which would have still delivered the MTFP objectives and allow both officers and the various BHAs to build a detailed harmonisation plan over the course of the next 12 months, this is a cynical attempt to raid the pockets of hut licence holders with a vague promise of improved facilities, details of which have not yet been established or presented. The plan as presented is flawed in its argument, our input has been ignored, and as a result we object in the strongest possible terms to the plan as presented. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chair, the next statements that we have received are all in relation to agenda item 8, Wycliffe Road, Keyhole Bridge, further review. In addition to the statements that have been circulated, there were 2 further statements received, but these fell outside of the procedure rules within the Constitution for public speaking. I'll read the first statement out, which is being received from Mark Hubland on behalf of Network Rail. I understand that the Council is considering relaxing the width restriction on the above structure. This is likely to increase the chances of bridge strikes at this location with an impact on train performance. The Council should be working with Network Rail in accordance with the Protocol on Bridge Strike Management to take measures to reduce bridge strikes. The relaxing of the width restriction does not appear to be within the spirit of the protocol. I request that the width restriction is not relaxed, or at the very least, until the full implication on bridge strikes is considered and discussed. The next statement is from Mr. Mark Saunders, a local resident. I hope this decision is about people, parks and peace rather than politics. I regularly walk between Sandbanks Road and Poole through Poole Park. The stream of cars and vans assuming right of way has spoilt this walk since Keyhole Bridge was reopened. As a car owner, I get their utility to visit parks, but not to just use them as an alternative through route. That is simply selfish. The next statement received is from Mr. Bob Salter, a local resident. Keeping Keyhole Bridge open to motorised vehicles does not align with the commitment of aiming to get 50% journeys within BCP on foot, scooter, bike, public transport by 2030, which was agreed to by 55-5 in the full council meeting on the 5th of December 2022. This is partly because when the bridge is flooded, it is lengthy, 1.6 kilometre diversion for those on foot, scooter, bike, wheelchair. Option C, to close the bridge, could allow for the footpath to be raised to overcome flooding issues so that the bridge remains accessible as a walking, cycling, scooting route at all times. The next statement we have received is from the Keyhole Safety Group, and this will be read out by Mrs. Sue Smith.
I don't believe I see Mrs. Smith here, so perhaps we could read that statement out on her behalf.
I will.
Is she on Teams? I can't see.
Not that I'm able to see.
Sorry, I can't. No, I can't.
I tend not to have public on Teams. So I think what we'll do is perhaps, unless Ms. Smith is here and we're not seeing her, we will read her statement out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. There is a 6-foot width restriction on Keyhole Bridge. During surveys carried out by Keyhole Bridge Group, 100% of motor vehicles using the bridge were in contravention of this order. The council cannot claim there is an economic case for drivers to use this route when it requires drivers to contravene a traffic order. As this economic case was the only justification for the decision to reopen the bridge, it follows that the decision cannot stand. We also refer Cabinet members to correspondence submitted by Network Rail and our legal representative objecting to any amendment to the width restriction order. Statement 9 is also from Mrs. Sue Smith in her personal capacity. The consultations on the Keyhole Bridge ERO identified a category of people whose reason for travelling to the area is to park free in Wycliffe Road. The second stage of the report shows that this biggest group asking for the bridge to stay open to traffic and also the biggest group objecting to it being closed or to running a further trial. It would be short-sighted to make policy decisions based on the convenience of this group and where they choose to park, particularly as the parking would still be available to them with the bridge closed to traffic. The next statement has been received by Miss Lucy Allen, Chair of the B8 Active Travel. Let's not dwell on government's gear change policy nor the consultation results as based on these alone. The decision to close Keyhole would be obvious. Instead, I'd like you to imagine yourself under the bridge. Now imagine yourself pushing a relative in a wheelchair. Now pushing a buggy whilst holding the hand of a 3-year-old. Now you are a parent cycling with a 6-year-old to the swings. Now you are a pensioner out for your daily walk to your local park. Now imagine a blind bend, no pavement, and cars approaching from both directions and being told to share the space. The next statement has been received from Mr. Simon Carter, local resident. I've seen that there is a 6-foot width restriction on the Keyhole Bridge, so I don't see how the council can claim this is an essential route. Given the current size of cars, 6 foot means that there are minimal cars that should be using it, not even a smart car. Surely this means it can't possibly be called an essential route. The next statement has been received by Mr. David Coltman, local resident. In 2021, a resident survey was carried out to help the development of BCP Council's green infrastructure strategy. When asked what would you change, the most frequently mentioned change was to do something about the volume of traffic in Poole Park. Closing Keyhole Bridge to traffic would achieve this. The need to reduce traffic in Poole Park has been raised by residents many times over the years. It's time for the council to do something about it. The next statement from Ms. Kate Salter, local resident. The Poole Park Life project aimed to make it harder to drive through the park. The evaluation report reveals the failure of it to reduce and calm traffic, identifying continued dissatisfaction about traffic in the park, and states this issue still needs to be addressed. Traffic in the parks inevitably produces air pollution, which now clearly linked with serious health impacts. The people of Poole should at least be able to breathe clean air at the parks. Closing the bridge to traffic could achieve the public desire for traffic reduction, whilst also reducing air pollution inside the park. Statement from Mandy Burt, local resident. Both the original and new consultation for Keyhole Bridge clearly indicate that a majority of the public are in favour of option C, shutting the bridge to motorised vehicles. On the 15th of December 2021, in a call-in of the decision regarding Tatnam Road closure, this Conservative Cabinet set a precedent by justifying reopening that road, saying that they needed to listen to the public consultation, which indicated a majority against the road closure. In alignment with this, Keyhole Bridge should be closed to motorised vehicles. Statement from Ms. Claire Hadley, local resident. It is vitally important for our health and the future of the planet to provide safe cycling and walking infrastructure to enable increased take-up of sustainable travel and reduce traffic congestion and pollution. Keyhole Bridge must be an important part of this initiative. It is no longer fit for purpose as a route for cars, especially if legal width requirement is obeyed. Poole Park would also benefit hugely by reducing the traffic flow through it. It seems ridiculous to allow the level of traffic through a park where small children enjoy the space to run around. Statement from Mr. Paul Bradley, local resident. Keyhole Bridge is intrinsically linked to Poole Park. The bridge is the key enabler for traffic to avoid the Civic Centre Island to Sandbanks Road. This leads to speeding through the park and dangerous overtaking. Personal experience. Park user surveys, not council, have demonstrated that at peak hours less than 15% of vehicles use the park to go to Tremlow Avenue or stay in the park. The rest go through Keyhole Bridge. BCP needs to declare what their objective is: safety of people at Keyhole and Poole Park, or traffic economics. To say traffic economics over safety is morally bankrupt. Statement from Mr. Derek Heritage, local resident. Cars are now much bigger, and I feel that an accident could occur at any moment. You have a unique opportunity to make a stand not only for our safety, but also for the air quality and general ambience of the park. Thank you for considering this appeal for a better, safer park for our children. A statement from Miss Philippa Clark. White paper gear change instructs prioritising active travel over motorists for everyone's health. Keyhole should be motor free, so users of both parks can enjoy tranquil views, sounds and fresh air in safety. Failure to impose width restrictions encourages unlawful use which endangers others, and increasing that restriction is ludicrous. Cars can easily divert to other routes. Pedestrians, including school children, cannot. Without cars, the floor level could be raised to avoid flooding. Photos, videos of vehicles blocking the entire width or brushing past pedestrians should be enough. Keeping it open brings more shame on this nationally derided debacle. Statement from Mr. Ransom. I am a wheelchair user and not a car driver. I often try and wheel through here unaided, but because I cannot use the path to the side, it does annoy the cars as I am not very fast. To keep this open to cars would keep it as a no-go area for me. And the final statement from Susan Stockwell. Common sense dictates that the earth is flat, aeroplanes will never fly, and allowing vehicles through Keyhole Bridge reduces traffic on parallel routes. This approach to fulfilling BCP's legal duty to manage traffic flow has resulted in world-leading congestion and accident rates in Bournemouth. Please allow your council officers to apply their professional qualifications in operation, research, analytics, queuing theory, instead of bowing to ill-informed common sense of a few residents based on ignorance, prejudice and fear. Protect Keyhole Bridge and Poole Park from through traffic to reduce the traffic on roads around the park. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And can I just thank every member of the public who took the time to put those statements in today as well. And they have been shared and they will be taken into account when we have our discussions on those items further down the agenda. Okay, so then we move now to agenda item 5, which is recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board, which I don't believe we had any formally. So I will move to agenda item 6 now, which is the Budget Monitoring and Financial Strategy Update report. So that's for me to present. We've been seeing this report monthly, and just to take a step back, we were in a situation early in the summer where we had a significant deficit for 23-24, and we'd had material pressure post the February budget being announced because of the cost of living crisis. So that is effectively, we believe, a £25 million impact in this year and a £30 million next year. So neither of those sums were we were aware of when we set our budget. So the fact we've now through a process through the summer and the autumn, we've moved to originally move that deficit down to 16 million and in balance. And now we're actually in a position for the first time to say we can see post the autumn statement that there will be potentially £6.2 million worth of savings we were considering making, that we can now have a bit more flexibility on. What it also does is this shows us that we've now got a largely balanced, or show how we can deliver a largely balanced 4-year medium-term financial plan, which is very helpful. So my thanks to Cabinet and senior officer colleagues who have worked through that with us. In the year now, you'll see that our surplus has risen to £9 million in year. That's in part due to the expenditure control we put in. So when we were in the throes of trying to work out what we were able to do to mitigate that massive cost of living issue, we stalled expenditure, and we also had to look at some very difficult decisions as well. It's still a challenging time for local government finances, but we're at least able to look to start being more positive now as well. And I think it's not lost on us that we're now, because of our LGR, the benefit and the £50 million we've already saved through LGR, we're in a strong position going forward, which our transformation savings will also support us over the course of our medium-term financial plan. Probably just worth updating. There's one of our material risks is around the high needs block, effectively, which we had some dispensation from government. We've now seen, I think it was this week actually, that that dispensation has been extended for a further 3 years, which is really great. It's really, it doesn't solve the problem long term, but we do recognise that it's a national problem. We're working with the LGA on it. We're not effectively as found out authority on it, but it will be a very material issue for us if it's not addressed by government in the next 3 years. So since we've had this report, that material risk in terms of having 3 further years to work that through with government is really very positive for us. So Cabinet, you'll have seen this report on a number of occasions, and I really appreciate the depth and detail overview and scrutiny have gone through in terms of working on us to get to this position. So thanks both to you and to overview and scrutiny, and very happy to take any questions. I believe Councillor Nicola Green is second. Nicola.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you very much for setting out how this paper today tells the story of the journey that we've been on through the late summer and the autumn, working incredibly hard, and our sincere thanks to all the finance team, not only within the central team but within the services themselves, which have given us the information that we've needed to be getting to this point. Of course, the story hasn't reached the end. We'll be expecting the government settlement over the next week or 10 days, and that will fill in some of the remaining gaps. There are clearly sensible assumptions which have been made, but we'll get ever more certain as we receive those figures and move into our published budget plan. And I'm just so pleased to see the gaps narrowing, the confidence with which we can move forward onto those real priorities, including our children's services improvement programme. And formally second the recommendations. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so we've also got Councillor Broadhead would normally be in the room, so we'll come to Councillor Broadhead now, and then I'll look to other members of the council to speak. So Phil.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and apologies to us today. You wouldn't want me sat next to you right now, and indeed the whole Broadhead household. So, but pleased to be able to join virtually. I think just to build on a couple of your points, the reason for doing these papers is to show the progress that we've made on this journey. It's not to preen or to show off, but it's actually to give our residents the assurance that despite what is extremely challenging times for the whole of local government, as well as families and businesses, that we've been working really hard to show them that there is a way through without taking very drastic decisions. I think it is also worth highlighting, and this is not a political point at all, so because I won't name the other councils, but if you just look at the 3 closest upper tier local authorities to us, and again I won't mention names, and look at their most recent financial updates, one of them is forecasting a 9.5 million overspend this year, and it's still got a £17 million gap for next year's budget. Another one has a £7 million overspend for this year and a £29 million budget gap for next year, and the final one has at least a £10 million overspend this year, and it's still in a position to have £51.2 million gap for next year. Now it's not a competition at all, because this is a national problem that every single council is in the same position as us, as having to deal with these cost of living challenges. But I do hope it gives our residents some assurance that by getting ahead of this and now having a surplus for both this year and next year, it does enable us to have to not take some of those very difficult decisions that I'm sure other local authorities will have to. I think we also need to have a little bit of humility, as you mentioned, Chairman. During that process, we've had to be very prudent about making sure that we are in control of this year's spending. That's meant some difficult decisions. You know, an example is for 8 to 10 weeks, we instructed our libraries not to buy any new library books. Although now that we are in a better position, and you may wish to say more on this, I think we are getting more back to business as usual in terms of spending within all of our directorates. But it's decisions like that we have to take to be prudent, which avoids a worse decision of maybe closing libraries, which other councils are doing. So I think ultimately, you know, we have been on a journey with this. I don't know any other local authority, upper tier local authority, that is now in a position of a largely balanced four-year financial plan. Again, you know, echo your points. I do think that's because with bringing the councils together, we've been able to do that £50 million of savings per year alongside our transformation programme. So difficult choices have had to be made, not half as difficult as they might been if we didn't get on top of this. And again, I'd echo Councillor Nicola Green's point that this has been a collective amount of hard work, not just through Cabinet, but officers and all of our stakeholders, as well, as we look to the future and deliver services slightly differently as well. So it does give us a really strong base for next year's budget. There's decisions that we might have had to take that we now don't have to take, but we're also underway doing a massive consultation with the public, and I'd urge people to get involved in that, talking about what their biggest priorities are, but also areas where the community can get involved, because there are a number of examples, and we've got a huge amount already, whereby services that are currently provided by the council, maybe we're not the best people to provide those services. It might be community groups, it might be voluntary groups, it might be other businesses. So I would urge people to feed into that survey, give us your ideas, but we are building on from a much stronger base than we might have imagined only 3 or 4 months ago. Thank you, Chairman.
Absolutely, thank you very much. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll move to wider members of the council, and the first I have showing is Andy Hadley. Good morning, Councillor Hadley. Andy.
Good morning. Thank you, Leader. This is a really difficult area there are multiple reasons why we're in this position, but one of the key ones is the decision back at when the budget was set around the beach huts, and that was a choice made by this administration. We're balancing the books by stalling, I think was the term that you used, expenditure for 2 months, and it's interesting to hear Councillor Broadhead say that break has been released, because I was in a meeting yesterday where an officer was very clear they weren't in a position to spend any money, and I think there's a real difficulty about how we ensure that people are, we're paying a lot of people a lot of money to run this council, and we need to make sure that they are now free to spend money on those things that are important, but perhaps they've been holding off, because otherwise the services we provide to residents are severely affected by that. There's also the huge hikes to fees and charges, and you've already had the statements from the beach hut users, and that obviously comes back to you. But that's representative of a number of areas where there's a choice being made to hit our residents. And raiding reserves, and again, the peer review advice was very much that we shouldn't be further depleting our reserves. We've taken a very big cut in reserves in order to fund things. That's a one-off thing. We can't do that again. That's setting up problems for the future, as is significantly increasing our borrowing. So I'm not sure that we are being prudent, or you are being prudent, and I think you're setting up problems for the longer term in the approach that's being taken. But it is difficult times, and I do recognise that. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll just see if any other, I do have some comments on that, but see if any other members of the wider council want to speak. Not seeing that now. So yeah, perhaps I'll come back. Sorry, is it Councillor Dedman you looking to speak? Yes, please, Councillor Dedman.
Yes, I'm so sorry, Speaker. I usually do it remote. So sorry, Leader. Sorry, I'm the Speaker. Yes, I just wanted to point out something that was pointed out at Adult Social Care and Health, which is, I think, under the 10, 11, 12, that one of the problems that adult social care is having is a lack of staffing, which of course is relieving the pressure on our budget, as we know, because we are not able to, as it says, I think, in the report, it's unmet care needs. And I'm very conscious of this, obviously out in the community, and I'm very sure that the portfolio holders are conscious of this. And I'm sure that the council will give us an assurance that this won't be seen as a future budget saving. It won't be, this is where we are now and this is where we stay, that we will carry on meeting the needs as much as we can. So that was all I wanted to say. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. I've been called a lot worse, so that's very happy to be called that. Thank you. So what I'll do, I'll just respond to the points in terms of adult social care first, and come back to Councillor Hadley. I think it's an absolutely valid comment, and it's in the report. There is a workforce challenge, not just in the health environment, but across in our environment services as well. We've struggled to recruit a number of staff, and that has perversely have a positive budget impact in terms of we can't recruit, we can't spend, and it's at least a part of the reason we're in a £9 million surplus. Absolutely, we're working very closely with our health partners across the whole workforce. I think we've really appreciated how we've been coming together through the ICB, and how we can then, as one system, look to respond to that workforce challenge. But it's absolutely this council's record investment we put into adult social care over the last 2 years. We'll continue to do that. It's an absolute priority for us. Before I move on to Councillor Hadley, our Director of Finance, Adam Richards, is showing. So Adam, perhaps I'll bring you in now. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. And for the purpose of the tape, my name's Adam Richards. I'm the Service Director for Finance. Can I just, if I may, Chair, just offer a little bit of clarification in the sense that I think Cabinet in September agreed to the expenditure control until such time as a balanced budget for 23-24 has actually been delivered. So the expenditure control will remain in place up to and including February. However, as set out in the report, I will be writing to all budget holders and service directors to explain and really emphasize that within that control, when it was put in place, there was always the possibility that they could make proposals to not to accord with that, to actually put forward expenditure proposals, provided yourself as leader and myself agreed and endorsed that approach. So I will be writing to people hopefully before Christmas just to emphasise that point, and hopefully that will encourage some of those proposals to come forward for consideration.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Adam. Okay, so just to go through some of the points that Councillor Hadley made, I actually have some disagreement in terms of the situation we're in is because of our original beach hut plan. It's got nothing to do with our revenue budget. Effectively, that was how we're going to fund our transformation journey, which is effectively capital, not revenue. So, and it's that transformation journey that balances our budget over the next 4 years. So, just to be clear, I don't think that's factually correct. Adam, I was going to talk through the point now. We've always had that control in place and the opportunity for it to come through us, but we're now more widely going out to people to ask, well, okay, if there's anything we have, difficult decisions we have made over the last couple of months, and pausing work, well, where else can we open that back up again now in the right sensible way? So thank you very much for adding on that. In terms of reserves, it's completely the opposite actually. Again, so just to remind Cabinet colleague, I think Councillor Hadley was saying that what we were doing was taking money from reserves. It's the opposite. We've committed to be putting an extra 700,000 into unearmarked reserves across the next 5 years, because our overall cost base has grown. Even though we were doing that, that still wasn't getting us to the recommended 5%. So what in this report we've shown to do is to actually get there in this year. So again, we're not just trying to get to the 5%, we're trying to grow above it. So clearly in this report we are talking about putting more money into unearmarked reserves. There aren't many other councils in the country looking to do that at all. So I have to take some pride in that. And again, I think there's a misunderstanding around borrowing as well, because saying our budget issue, increased borrowing is going to cause us a budget issue. Is not at all. Again, borrowing, we can only borrow now largely for whether it's a positive business case. So if we're actually borrowing, there's another side of the side of the equation, which is the asset we're bringing on board. That asset will be having to pay back that debt and have to make a surplus because it's a positive business case. And when the debt is paid down on those assets, we will still own them. So it's entirely the opposite that has been put forward by Councillor Hadley, unfortunately. But hopefully, I've been able to add some clarification to that. Okay. Do any other members of Cabinet wish to come in and speak on that? I'm not seeing it, so I'll just ask everybody to look at the recommendations. One through six.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I've indicated for some time. Can you not see my hand?
I can't see your hand on my screen, Jude. So perhaps, but feel very free to. Now I can see. That's great. Okay, thank you, Councillor Jude Butt.
Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just reporting back from, obviously, with the engagement role, with how residents are feeling with all this. And there are some stark examples of where things are going very wrong. I'll give one very small example because I know we're counted for time. And that's the blue badge application. You put in for a blue badge and you're being told it's a minimum of 12 weeks. Now, blue badges are for our most disabled and our most vulnerable. People need them quickly. There is an absolute entitlement to some of these badges if you tick a certain box, and yet these people are waiting with the people who may not be entitled the same time. They're not sifted out. Now, we understand that there are very few people actually dealing with these blue badges, and residents, want to know when the modal shift of finances is going to start providing for these basic services, because 12 weeks for a blue badge is absolutely unacceptable. And there are many, many other examples, which are all small basic things that we should be doing better. I'm just giving you one example for today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. We can absolutely look into that. I think there isn't a budget region, so in terms of this paper, why that is technically where it is, but we can look in. We're going to go to Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Green. Mark.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Butt, I'm very concerned about this because I've had several people approach me and I've told them where to access blue badge information and how to apply through the council's website. Both people who are applying for the first time and people who are asking for a return, and they've come back to me and said that they've managed to do it within a couple of weeks. So I do take on board the comments you've made. It's not my area, but I would be very concerned as well. But that's not the experience I've had, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. Mike.
Thank you, Leader. Funnily enough, it's not actually in my area either, but because it's blue badges and it's parking, many people have thought that it is, and that's also been the case in my previous portfolio in Bournemouth. So I do tend to get quite a lot of correspondence about delays in getting blue badges. But one thing I just wanted to say is that's been the case. I'm not saying that it's right that it should be the case. It absolutely isn't, and it needs to be addressed. But that has been the case for many, many years, and I've seen nothing whatsoever which has suggested that it's got any worse over the past few months with the financial constraints that we've had than it has been certainly since I took over this role in BCP and previous as well. It still remains, Leader, something that I think does need to be addressed.
And absolutely, thank you, and we can pick that up.
Mr. Chairman,
we'll
could I
pick that up.
Mr.
Councillor
Chairman,
Butt.
could I just share one small? The reason I'm raising this is because I've been assisting people with this very application, and the email comes back and it tells them there's a 12-week wait. So it is something that we're actually sending out to our prospective blue badge holders. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. We can look into how we can expedite that. But just to be clear, that's got that wait. It's got nothing to do with the budget decisions we've made earlier in this year. Okay, thank you. So now let us move to the vote. Please, all those in favour, please show. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so appreciate the comments and feedback on that report. So we now move to agenda item 7, which is exploring the options for devolution to BCP Council. So just take a step back. In February, I believe it was February of this year, the government released its white paper on levelling up, and I'm absolutely delighted to see further down the agenda some of the work and fruition from our lead member for levelling up, which is further on this agenda, and how we're really trying to drive that. A constituent part in that whole paper was plan to devolve power and give local leaders and communities the tools they need to make better places. That's absolutely something we support. We do believe the decisions should be made locally, and we were really pleased to see our national government doing that, appreciate it as well, and bringing that forward. What we wanted to do was to make sure that that discussion effectively we were having came through the cabinet process, so we could just air in public where we are on that to date. So we've been doing a number of pieces of exploratory work with there's an element of quite strong flexibility. I think government are asking local areas to come forward where there's strong local agreement and effectively make a pitch to government around levelling up. So and devolution. So what we've done is we've maintained dialogue with all of our local partners, which splits pretty much into a Dorset context and also a Central South context as well. So we've been having dialogue with there. It's probably really important to say absolutely nothing has been just decided yet. What we're trying to do is bring update effectively, a cabinet council where we are with the process. We've had some changes of ministers. So we originally had a conversation with I believe it was Neil O'Brien, and now the minister's changed. So we are in the process of, and I thank our MPs actually for their support in terms of getting that direct interface with national government to see, despite those changes of ministers, where government is really looking and what is attractive to government as well. So so just very early stages. We're very happy to continue those discussions. And perhaps I will move now to I believe it's Councillor Nicola Green who is going to second that, and then I'll bring Councillor Broadhead in.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, very happy to formally second it, noting very much your comments about the nascent stage of these conversations.
Thank you. Councillor Broadhead, Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Again, I think this is a really update to Cabinet and just outline some of the very early discussions that have been having. What I think is really beneficial with the recommendations here is that it seeks the Cabinet's approval to continue conversations that have been had, informal conversations where essentially to date we've been invited by the other parties to talk to them. So, to be really clear, this has not been BCP driving the conversation. I think there is a point to be made that we don't want to be left out. It's pretty clear that the government's direction of travel is to more local devolution, to local leaders. We've already got a lot of that through the local government reorganisation process. But as you said, that there's been a number of updates from governments and changes recently that moved from a position that was quite defined at the beginning of this journey to a much more open position and a different menu of options to local authorities. So I think what this paper does is react to the fact that and many other local authorities have been inviting us to the conversation and indeed have expressed their own preference. We've seen the Cabinet preference from Dorset about a closer working relationship with us. We've also seen a preference from other areas such as Hampshire and the kind of that central south that they would like to work with us as well. I think it's important within the recommendation that we ask to bring a report back on that. I think the two things that are really clear in terms of the next steps is first of all to look deeply at the pros and cons of all of the different proposals, and there might even be something that we haven't been exploring to this date, other options that we might want to lead on, or we might not actually want to do anything at all, but also to react to the government's point, which is made in the paper, that consultation will be pretty central to that. So to be really clear, today we've had some very early informal conversations with other local leaders about what their preference would be. And I think next, our job would be to look at that in detail and to do a really serious piece of consultation with the public to talk through those options and see what works best for BCP, if any. So I think it's really important that we've had those conversations today. We haven't been driving it, but there could be something in there, and we just need to talk to our partners and talk to the public and see what comes out. So I really look forward to the next report and the consultation that will happen after that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to bring first Councillor Phipps, then Councillor Dedman, and then Councillor Hadley is joining online. So good morning and welcome, Margaret.
Thank you very much. I wasn't actually going to speak on this, but as I'm here, I do have some concerns about this. First of all, I note here it was key partners in the Pan-Hampshire County deal who've supported that issue in November 2021 in a statement of common ground. So we've actually got that far. Who decided to go in amongst this? Was it just the Cabinet, I presume? Because I don't think this has come to Council at all. I haven't really heard much about this. I do have some concerns that this might be devolution downwards from government, and maybe it's great for them, but as far as local people are concerned, it's not devolution at all. And we're likely, I would think, to lose local decision making even more than we have at the moment in the situation that we're in. And one of the things here at figure 21 states that we would be big enough in geography to have a directly elected mayor, and that's down as a strength. Now, I think before we go too far with this, I realise that this is just something that is being looked at the moment. I understand all of that. But I do think you need to be consulting or going further with the residents Do they actually want this? And they need to have a better understanding of what is going on, rather than decisions thus being made here within the cabinet. Yes, we'll go further, we'll take this further, because I think we've all seen this before. Oh, well, it's all right, we're just looking at it, we'll see how it goes. But then the next thing that happens is, before you know where you are, you're actually in amongst it, and you're having a report come forward that how wonderful things are, and you haven't even asked the people that it will be affected. So those are my concerns that I wanted to air. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And I'll now go to Councillor Dedman.
Thank you, Leader. As you can tell, Christchurch Independents have no whip and don't collude before meetings, because I was just going to say, at point 24, both leaders have decided against the directly elected mayor. And I just wondered if this is the forum to discuss that, or will we discuss that at a later date? Because personally speaking, I'm not going to pin my flag to the mast, but I wonder why. Because it just seems quite a good idea. The ones that one sees on the telly. Just giving you a hint here, Drew, that you'd be good at it.
Thank you very much, I think. Okay, going to come to Councillor Hadley. Andy.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's interesting and helpful to see the report at this stage. I think it's that's a good thing. But it does seem that reorganisation of this sort of middle tier is perpetual. And I think we need to be really clear about what are the likely benefits for BCP residents, business and visitors, to ensure we're just not at the party to make up numbers. And I'm kind of a bit concerned that, you know, we've heard the Dorset view, we've heard the Hampshire view. I'm throughout my whole career working in the NHS, there's been perpetual reorganisation of that tier of commissioning healthcare across the area at the same geography, effectively right the way up to Somerset and with Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And I started my career when Wessex Regional Health Authority was just ceasing to exist. So I'm kind of concerned that it's just a reorganisation of the pieces. And we might create the ambition to fix some long-standing problems, and I think that's valuable. But the paper highlights that ministers expect to see savings from this. So it's the usual story, do a lot more with a lot less resource, which worries me. I'm also concerned that the paper largely repeats chunks of the independent advisors paper for the Dorset system, which is fine, but it kind of suggests we haven't got the expertise or we haven't devoted the time internally to our own thinking. So I hope that is a key part of the next step. This is about specifically sector growth and skills, place strategy, net zero and integrated transport. And so it is the sorts of things that the combined authorities have already been about. But the risk analysis highlights that, you know, for Hampshire, they are already established, as I think Councillor Phipps said, and there's a real risk that we are sort of added on, that decisions that are made on behalf of the big ports of Southampton and Portsmouth, and then Poole just gets to be a little add-on mention, or the airport, Southampton Airport is very well connected with public transport, Bournemouth is not, and so we've got some real challenges, I think, that way. You could say that Dorset's of interest because we've already stated no mayor, but it does have established networks, and some of those are our networks around adult education, which is for a skills paper later on the agenda today. The working between Weymouth, Portland Port and Poole Port, there are things that we are of a similar scale, and therefore perhaps we can move forward together. Dorset has a very long list of asks, which again is really helpful, and I think it'd be really good if the wider councillors and the public get a chance to be involved in developing that. I think the other part, though, is the transport. We have the Western Gateway, which is us plus a slice up towards Bath and Bristol. And the question of, does this replace that? Is it additive to that? And whatever we choose in terms of the model for this, we're going to have to work in all directions anyway, because we sit at the junction. It's like with the weather. If it's raining in the West Country, we're probably in the West Country, and if it's raining in the South, we're probably in the South. But we will have to work across this geography in all directions. Our transport links are not good to the West and the North. They are already pretty good to the East. My personal view is the strong Dorset collaboration would be a better melding of priorities of equals, being appended to Hampshire. I think we run the risk of being a forgotten add-on, especially because we don't seem to have the people in place to develop the strategy for what we want. So please, can we be really clear about what it's going to bring for us, not just being at the party? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Andy. Okay, I'll now bring Councillor Tony Trenton. Morning, Tony. actually, Councillor Trent isn't showing anymore. I'll just pause briefly to see if he's coming back on. No, I'm not seeing that. Okay, fine. Are there any members of Cabinet who would like to contribute in this paper? I'm very happy to sum up as well. Councillor Green, Mike.
Thanks very much, Lisa. I'd just like to say something in support of what Councillor Hadley's mentioned about transport routes. Certainly he's right that they are considerably better to the east than they are to the north or the west, and that is something that Western Gateway, as the Subnational Transport Body, as Councillor Hadley suggests, is looking to improve. But one of the things that I see is a sort of a cycle of despair to some extent, where if one area is not seen as economically vibrant enough, then it becomes less likely as a candidate for transport investment. The fact that it becomes less likely as a candidate for transport investment means that it has less chance to improve economically. And if we are stuck on the end of, right at the end of whichever area it is, where we are not one of the most important economic centres, then that is likely to cause us problems in the future. Where I do welcome this paper is I think it's very even-handed. It's not saying we should be looking at Japan, Hampshire. It's not saying we should be looking at Dorset. It's not saying we should be looking at directly elected mayor or any other particular form of local democracy. I think what it does quite fairly is say all of these options are open to us, and this is something that we want to be able to explore further into the future.
Yeah, agree. Thank you. Councillor Butt-Jude.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Hadley rather shot, I think, everybody's fox. He summed it up very well. And I agree, there is a nervousness, I think, around the expertise to herd all these caterpillars together necessary to make this work. But also, whatever this model is going to look like, the integration at the earliest possible stage with regard to residents and how they understand it and how they can contribute to it in real terms. I loathe these tick box exercises where people are asked specific questions and it's just a stat. It's not actually getting the hub of what's needed is really key. So I'm sure that will be on the minds of everybody as we journey further with this issue. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. And I agree wholeheartedly with a lot of the points that have been made, effectively. And I think it just also shows and underlines how important it will be to get that full member and community involvement as we build this up going forward, because there are different views and there is nervousness. I believe in local decisions being made more locally. I think that's really great strength. I think we've got some excellent expertise across this organisation. We're now one of the larger councils in the country, and we're really building into that space. So I do think we're in a good position to effectively respond to this going forward. So very clearly, no decisions have been made. It would just remind people as a recommendation, approve the continuation of exploratory work, and request a further report is brought back to Cabinet. So we will look to work with colleagues to see about that. And now Tony, Councillor Trent is speaking. I had moved on, but I'd rather hear Tony. No, he's not again. Fine, okay. So, yeah, Councillor Trent, if you could either keep your hand down or up, it would be appreciated. Would you like to come in now?
Yes. Apologies. I've got one of these weird connections that tells me I'm not properly connected, and I have to keep clicking wait and so on. And anyway, I had to log out and log back in again. Hopefully, it's working now. But
it's working loud and clear, Tony. Delighted to hear from you now.
Yeah. Yeah, the question I wanted to ask about that paper, and I'm hoping someone can explain it to me, because it looks as if centralisation into what is effectively a regional level of control of things doesn't strike me as devolution. I find it very confusing, and I heard Councillor Dedman's points, which I think are worth listening to, because when we were presented with the I wasn't on the council at the time, presented with the options for the future, there were various things looked at, like an elected mayor, and it it seems to me that all of these things, it should have been up for discussion then, so that we could have gone along, for example, a Manchester model, where a number of authorities effectively have an elected mayor between them. And, you know, it seems to me that the implication is that's what's being looked at with this levelling up agenda. I'm not sure what's being levelled up. I think it's democratic control. But, you know, I wonder if someone could explain to me how this works, because I do struggle to understand it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the comments, Tony, and I'll just finish summing up. So effectively, you know, it's certainly the government's belief that this is actually empowering local leadership and bringing decisions down to a local level. So it's completely the reverse of centralisation. You know, I think one view I will express in this process as we go through is we have just done a really substantial local government reorganisation process here. So, you know, in terms of, you know, looking at directly elected mayors or not, I think there's there will be some reticence and challenge around that, because we have actually, you know, I believe it's one of the largest pieces of local government reorganisation, certainly for a generation. And there's an element there we need to let that bed in. But it's also about pushing against open doors. And if the deal is good enough, we certainly want to be at the table with government, discussing it with them and our local partners. And that's certainly what I will continue to be. And I believe the recommendations in this paper effectively, you know, support. So approves a continuation of exploratory work. Just to absolutely underline, you know, there have been no decisions made, there will be no decisions made. We need to now work closer with government, closer with local partners, and then develop that all member and community discussion about where we can potentially take this forward. So I'm very happy with the recommendations as put, and I don't see anybody else coming in to speak, so I will move those recommendations. All those in favour, please show. Great, thank you, it's unanimous. Okay, so now we will go to agenda item 8, which is Whitecliffe Road, Keyhole Bridge, further review. Again, just to thank the members of the public who made the statements earlier in the agenda. And I'll come now to Councillor Mike Green to introduce the item. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lee. Yeah, happy to introduce the item, and like you, I'd also like to thank the members of the public who've made their statements today, or had those statements read out on their behalf, and also for those that have had taken such great interest in it over the course of the consultations and before that. Just a little bit of history first of all. I made the decision to stop the ETRO and reopen the road back in February 21, I think it was. In doing so, I considered all the representations received. I looked at several factors. And among those factors, and the most important ones in my mind, were access to and enjoyment of the park. With the bridge closed, there were advantages to those travelling by foot or by cycle, including those with pushchairs. There were also disadvantages to those with mobility problems who need to drive. And the equality reports and consultation responses on this paper reflect those two themes. So air quality. With the bridge closed, there was an advantage within the park. However, there was a corresponding disadvantage to those on alternative routes to which the traffic will be displaced, including Parkston Road. There's residential accommodation on those alternative routes, and therefore the effect of the poorer air quality would probably be more severe than that experienced in the park with the bridge open. Road safety. With the bridge closed, it will likely be safer for those travelling through the bridge on foot or by cycle, although there were some reports, without evidence, of cyclists and motorcyclists travelling faster under the bridge without the risk of meeting a car. However, the increased number of journeys on alternative routes add to the road safety dangers there, and the collision and accident data seem to me to support the latter argument. And the actual numbers are in the report along with the analysis, and I'd point members to paragraphs 45 to 47. And the other one that we looked at was the economic disbenefit as a result of increased journey times. With the bridge closed, it's likely that traffic's displaced to Parkston Road and other alternative routes. And during peak times, that causes delays. And that was evidenced by data from 2016, during, before and after the Keyhole Bridge route was unavailable to drivers. And a crude calculation was carried out using that data, which demonstrated the economic cost of closing the bridge would be substantial. The decision was challenged by the Keyhole Group or Keyhole Bridge User Group, I'm not quite sure which it's called now, via a judicial review. The judge found against the council on one point. In effect, she said that by closing the consultation when we did, which was before the ETRO had been in place for 6 months, we denied the opportunity for anybody who might not yet have made a representation, and there was a chance that such a representation might provide an argument significant enough to lead to a different outcome. She therefore instructed the council to reopen the consultation for a further 40 days and for Cabinet to decide between the 3 options which are on the paper today. And there were some further instructions about the questions to be asked and who should participate in the consultation. The responses were collated and analysed, with a summary provided in today's paper. The majority of responses had already been brought up in previous consultations, or the majority of themes, although related to items previously considered. But the key new element that was considered, and the challenge of my own argument about economic benefit and disbenefits will be caused particularly by the delays that result from the traffic display to alternative routes and specifically Parkstone Road. There were 2 analyses done. Dorset Council was commissioned by BCP to produce an independent and balanced economic assessment. With view of that, the campaign group's consultant in favour of the bridge's closure commissioned their own consultants, which is KMC, to provide an alternative analysis. The 2 analyses followed similar paths but produced very different results. As a result, the consultants WSP were commissioned to examine both and explain why the results are so different, and both the analyses and WSP's report are contained within the papers you got in front of you today. The KMC and Dorset Council reports followed similar paths, as I said. Both agreed that the bridge's closure would cause delays and that there's an economic cost to that. Both have agreed that the bridge's closure would generate more active travel trips and that there is an economic benefit from that, primarily for health reasons. The differences in predicted outcome come effectively from 3 different inputs, and in deciding which of those 2 analyses is more likely to provide accurate predictions, I believe that Cabinet today needs to decide which of those sets of inputs it believes are the most reasonable. The first difference between the 2 analyses is the presumed occupancy of the vehicles. Dorset Council uses the DFT average figure of 1.43, whereas the KMC analysis uses the DFT commuter figure of 1.14. Bear in mind, please, that some of the vehicles that are travelling on Parkstone Road are buses, so when considering what that should be. But the greater the number of people delayed by the congestion resulting from the displaced traffic, the greater the economic cost, although that difference does seem to have limited effect compared with some of the other factors that go into the input. The second difference also impacts the economic cost of the increased journey times and relates to the number of trips affected. The Dorset analysis takes the 2016 data and bases its calculation on 854 eastbound journeys per hour that suffer a delay of 202 seconds during the key evening peak. It doesn't take any account of any journeys outside those 2 peak hours, or indeed from the westward direction, and so it may underestimate the cost. The KMC analysis uses the same base number of trips, but it makes the assumption that adding the traffic that uses Keyhole Bridge to the traffic that uses Parkstone Road will actually reduce the number of trips that drivers make on Parkstone Road by 10.6% due to a phenomenon it describes as traffic evaporation. So it suggests that adding diverted traffic to Parkstone Road will result in even fewer trips than those that weren't added beforehand. So just to get this clear, because it is a little bit difficult to understand, and I'm just going to round numbers generally. They're suggesting that if 1,700 vehicles are travelling in a 2-hour period on Parkstone Road and 500 going through Keyhole Bridge, if you added those 500 that are going through Keyhole Bridge to the 1,700 that are on Parkstone Road, the net result would be that you only got about 1,530 vehicles going through, because the overall number would reduce not just from the sum but from the individual as well. And it also suggests that because of that, delays will be shorter, leading to a lower economic cost. And the third and most important difference between the 2 analyses is the assumed additional active travel journeys that will be generated by closing Keyhole Bridge. Both analyses make the assumption that this will lead to new additional journeys, and the formula is used for the economic benefit that these bring. And I said there are a number of factors that come into that including greenhouse gas effects, diversion or modal shift comes across. Actually, government spend is another one that is a benefit, but primarily they come down to health benefits, particularly those that come from reduced expectancy or reduced possibility of premature death. That is probably the major one that comes out of it. But also there are mental health and other aspects which are the benefits of it. But when we look at these additional trips that are generated, we do need to bear in mind that they need to be genuinely new trips. So they need to be, for example, somebody who's choosing to walk in Poole Park rather than in Whitecliffe Park, which is right next to it, that would not count as an additional trip for those calculations. Nor would someone who chooses to cycle through Keyhole Bridge to get to Poole Town Centre instead of using Parkston Road or using the Whitecliffe Beta route instead. Those would not count as new trips. Those are alternative trips. And each of those analyses uses a prediction of the number of genuinely new journeys which result purely because of the closure. So the Dorset Council analysis predicts that closure will lead to a 20% increase in cycling journeys that would not otherwise have taken place, and a 12% increase in pedestrian journeys that would not otherwise have taken place. What they then do is they feed this into a DFT recognised active mode appraisal toolkit, which estimates the monetised value that comes from those factors, again, such as a reduction in congestion, local air quality, reduced cost of accidents, reduction in greenhouse gases, with over, as I say, 90% of the benefits coming from the better health outcomes, which actually includes reduced absenteeism as well. So the justification for using those 20% and 12% increases are given in the Dorset Council report. And as a result, they concluded that those monetised benefits fall considerably short of offsetting the economic costs which the delays resulting from closure would add. And they've also stress tested that by considering a 55% increase in cycling trips rather than 20%. And still they find out that the benefits don't outweigh the costs. The KMC report that uses the AMAT toolkit as well, but it estimates much higher numbers of new trips that will be generated if the bridge is closed. They suggest that it will lead to a 125% increase in cycling and a 250% increase in pedestrian journeys. And the evidence they used was counts taken by the campaign group itself on a late afternoon when the bridge was closed in February 21 during lockdown when the schools were closed, and a corresponding one taken in the same hours in September 2021 outside lockdown when the bridge was open. Those counts, of course, haven't been verified, but those have been what feeds into the report. And their analysis scales those numbers to a 12-hour day, although it should be noted that parks actually closed to motor vehicles during the morning peak. And their prediction is that closing the bridge will mean that an average of 445 new cycle journeys a day over the year and an average of 2,396 new pedestrian journeys a day will be created. Again, bear in mind that they're predicting these as genuinely new journeys, not those that take place instead of walking or cycling somewhere else or on a different route. And plugging those figures, though, into the AMAT model, KMC predicts that the economic benefits will considerably outweigh the economic cost of the delays that the closure would cause. So Cabinet's obviously got the right to look at all the factors when making this new decision. This is a new decision, including qualities, access to the park, road safety, air quality, etc. However, for the reasons I gave in my original decision and the extra evidence contained in the papers today, I believe that all of those other factors have been very well considered. And the key question, although it's not the only one, is that of economic costs and the benefits that the closure would bring. So determining that probably comes round primarily to deciding which analysis we believe to be the most realistic. It's probably impossible for us to decide whether it's more realistic to say it's a 1.14 people in the car or 1.43 in the car like DFT suggests. But I would point out both studies that these new journeys are generated throughout a 12-hour day, and that would push me more towards the idea of that the 1.43 figure is more realistic, particularly once you take into account the buses, etc. as well. The paper does note that a short survey was carried out on Parkston Road at noon, which showed an average occupancy of 1.74. This may well not have been representative. We should consider whether we believe it's more realistic to agree with Dorset Council's analysis that the closing of the route through Keyhole Bridge will not affect the number of vehicles travelling on Parkston Road, or indeed potentially push them up, although that's not considered in the Dorset Council report, or whether KMC's prediction that pushing the Keyhole Bridge traffic into Parkston Road instead will actually lead to fewer cars using Parkston Road. That's something we need to consider. And we need to consider whether Dorset Council's assumption that closing the bridge will lead to a moderate increase in cycling and pedestrian journeys taken in the area, or the campaigners' consultants' assumption that closing the bridge would lead to almost 2,500 genuinely new pedestrian journeys and 445 genuinely new cycle journeys on average every day of the year. Once we decide which of these we believe in to be more realistic, we should be able to reach a rational decision regarding the economic effect of a potential bridge closure. In reaching our decision, it should, in my opinion, be accepted that it will necessarily be an on-balance decision that we make. Evidence has been produced which both supports closure and supports keeping the bridge open. The responses to the two consultations also show a strong body of opinion on either side of the argument. We should also take note that there's been a considerable amount of discussion regarding the current width restrictions on the bridge and how they are or are not being enforced. Physical restriction and enforcement of the current TRO would have a significant effect on the amount of traffic which can pass through the bridge, and the issue is therefore material. The officer report suggests we consider whether we might like to look at the TROs to adjust that restriction to reflect the width of cars currently in use, which has increased over the decades. However, arguments have also been presented against making changes to them. Such changes would be significant and could not be made without proper consultation, which would certainly involve Network Rail, who have sent a submission today as a key stakeholder, and the police, who are likely to continue as those responsible for enforcement here. Looking at TRO changes would further complicate the decision about whether to close the bridge or leave it open, and I believe, therefore, that any discussion about the width restriction should be left for another day. Leader, I'm sorry to have taken so long on this, but it has gone on for an awful long time, and there have been a huge number of representations over a number of years and a huge number of arguments that have been put forward. So I think it really, what I try to do in that is to present the arguments on both sides as well as I can, so that we can have a full discussion on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thank you for that. I think it's absolutely something that warrants the level of detail that you've gone into. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll come to wider members of council. And the first of those showing is Councillor Andy Hadley. Andy.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, the balance of public views in both the original and further consultations significantly favoured the closure. That's really no surprise to me, because when we were originally looking at the potential schemes, and it was I was in control when we put it in, I asked every councillor for their view across BCP, but we also asked the public. And this was one of the top 3 schemes, over 800 ideas that the public shared, because they could upvote other people's ideas, along with the uphill lane on Evening Hill, which we did, and a bridge over the River Stour by the Bailey Bridge works, which was too complicated and expensive to quickly do. The traffic modelling was based, Councillor Green referred to, was based on the 2016 total severing of the Park Road. That's quite a different measure, and you know, the closure of the bridge doesn't actually stop people who want to use the park getting in. It stops people finding an attractive route to go through the park with no intent to actually stop. The significant difference between the two models is really interesting. In particular, traffic evaporation is a really well understood phenomenon, in the same way as traffic generation. When you create a new road, more traffic decides it's, or more people decide it's a good way to get along that road. Traffic evaporation is equally a well-researched and understood phenomenon, and that didn't feature in the Dorset report. The economic benefit from walking and cycling, as covered by KMC, and you know, this was commissioned by the Keyhole Bridge a group, as I understand, but it was an independent traffic consultant who was looking at the report and analysing it in some detail. The diversionary route is highlighted as having 10 times the collision rate, but many of these collisions are at the Civic Centre, Joraitree, which is on the A35 route from Honiton to Southampton. It's a significant road. The roads down through Keyhole Bridge is a minor local road, and certainly the road through the park in Kings Park and in Merrick Park. The Bournemouth Council severed both of those routes to stop traffic going through those parks. Dispute over the few active travel schemes was the basis for the change of administration, and you promised to consult on issues. The consultation here clearly shows the majority would value reclosing Keyhole Bridge to motor traffic, and as the submission from Network Rail, the idea of narrowing the bridge, of widening the size of cars being able to go through the bridge is something that the Network Rail wouldn't countenance. And I would draw your attention to there's a road called Covert Lane, which has similarly a 6-foot width restriction and has metal barriers, and people still go through there in vehicles that are wider than 6 foot. So a physical constraint probably isn't going to work, and a width increase is probably going to be not appreciated by Network Rail. So I hope you will decide to listen to the public, to respect the consultation, and to value this beautiful link between two parks for the sake of people wanting to use them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. Okay, are there any other members of the wider council wishing to comment on this item? I'm not seeing that. So, Councillor Green, would you like to respond to that, or in your sum up?
If it's all right, could I hear if there are any other points from around the table, and I think or online from Cabinet Plus, and then if I could come back, and then maybe
we'll have
there may be opportunity for dialogue with that. I'm not sure.
Okay, first of all, I've got Councillor Anderson, Mark.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Green, are you aware that when we were doing the work on the park, we estimated that there are around about 900,000 visits to the park, which is the equivalent of around 2,500 a day anyway. So the consequences of an extra 2,500 going to the park was something that would certainly have to be considered. The other point I'd just like to comment on is the comment about Bournemouth and the 5 Parks Act, which Councillor Hadley referred to as the closure of Kings Park and Merrick Park. We were forced by the Parks Act to close these 2 parks. They weren't. They were forced on us. They weren't made by Bournemouth Borough Council. And I think Mike's previous predecessor in Bournemouth Council was very much against closing them, but had his hands forced and threatened with legal action if we didn't do it. So I think it's a very different situation, and that's pretty much all I had to say, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'll now come to Councillor Barron. Good morning, Steve.
Yeah, good morning, Chairman. Keyhole Bridge is in my ward, a ward that I was born in, so I do know it. I consider I know the ward better than most. In my time, I've walked through the bridge. I've pushed chairs through there with my own children in. I've driven cars and trucks through there, ridden bikes and mopeds, and even when I was a teenager, I've rode a skateboard through there, but I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that other people do that, because that was probably not the best thing to do. Of course, the bridge isn't ideal, but it does come down to people walking, cycling and driving to see the situation with appropriate care and attention. Closing the bridge also, it wouldn't just increase traffic on Parkstone Road, it also increases traffic on Orchard Avenue and Twemlow Avenue. And turning right out of Orchard Avenue onto Sandbanks Road is a problematic junction. You can't really see very far up the road, and there's one particular house that grows foliage out over the pavement, which it probably shouldn't do, but they do sort of regularly blocks the view even worse. So I think that's a consideration. It is a really contentious topic, hugely contentious. But from what I've heard over the years, as the ward councillor, is the majority of residents want it to remain open. That is pretty clear. If you see on Facebook, for instance, if the Echo does a report on it, you look on the comments on there. I'm not talking about the comments by sort of trolls on the Echo website, but actually real accounts with real local people on Facebook. It's just one after another saying leave it open, leave it open, leave it open, and very few say it should be closed, and when they do, they get kind of berated normally from others, which I'm not. Obviously, that's a good thing, but so I'm pretty sure that the majority of residents, certainly of Parkstone Ward, would like it to remain open. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. That's well said. Okay, I've now got Jude's Bart, and then Nicola, and then Bobby. So Jude's.
Yeah, thanks very much. The reason I'm not putting my photo on, as you see, I'm very, very dark, but I am actually here. Yes, I would support Steve's long historic knowledge and understanding of this particular area and this particular issue, as born and bred in Poole and knowing exactly what goes on there. The first consultation, it gave a salient argument, which was to keep the bridge open. And I can't see any new evidence that's been brought forward. Now, new evidence, not more weight of people saying they do or they don't like it. To me, that is just more people saying they do or they don't like it. The weight of numbers in the lobbying groups, submissions, etc. So the judicial review allowed more people to come forward, and obviously advantage was taken by that. And obviously it would be, and we all respect that those who thought they have an opportunity now to put forward their views, they put forward their views, and the numbers are weighted somewhat unevenly. The congestion, as stated in both reports, are exacerbated by any closure. So more congestion, traffic emissions, looking at the facts of the report, the air quality in both reports, a detrimental element to public health with any closure, and that's specifically on the Parkstone roadside. There are equality deficits which haven't been mentioned. There's one gentleman who advised us about his wheelchair, but there are many, many others who feel they can't access the park now because they, if the Keyhole Bridge isn't left open for them. There's a cost factor in there. I'm not quite sure how relevant that is to the public, because obviously cost is not something which I think has a salient argument. It's about the safety of people and the actual ability for people to be able to use this. And that's what it drills down to. It's about going out and about and speaking to people. And I've been out with Steve on the street, stamping the street very much to get some feedback on this. It's about everybody having fair and equal access to this Keyhole Bridge. It also seems to end up in sides, doesn't it? There's one faction against another faction, and that seems to be the way of politics, that one faction has to get more facts against the other one, and then hopefully it'll fall on one side or the other, and somebody will be put to a benefit and somebody will be put to a detriment. But nobody will actually get a resolution that suits everybody. I very much feel, as Margot Ledbetter from The Good Life said on paying her rates in the TV series The Good Life in those days, that, you know, the voice of the silent majority, who we haven't heard from today, we've had really good, salient, well-argued submissions put forward by 21 people, and they're much respected, and they have their point. But we haven't heard today from the hundreds and hundreds of other people who may have wanted the opportunity to perhaps to come along today and state their point, perhaps because they feel they've said what they've said, and they feel strongly that this bridge should remain open. We've not looked at any protections that could be put in place for our cyclists and our pedestrians, and those protections to monitor those behaviours, which we hear from our cyclist group, although we did hear that they were not evidence, but that they were some feedback from some experiences people had told us that they'd have. And some of those protections could be CCTV cameras in there to monitor what exactly is going on, because we don't know. We hear from one side and we hear from the other. Let's get those facts. Let's be clear on what is happening. Simple two-way mirrors, they work really well. It's a blind corner. It's not beyond the wit of man to put those in. And let's capture that relevant data regarding traffic safety. And the last thing is that what I find most remarkable about this whole matter is that it has not been an engagement process which has really been practical. It's been obviously the judicial review didn't help the situation, but the judicial review was an absolute right of that lobby to take forward because there was a breach with regard to timelines. But I'm disappointed that, again, engagement doesn't seem to be working in a way which it should be able to sit down around the table together and the cyclist groups put forward their point, and the public put forward their point, and there be a meeting of minds. There's been no meeting of minds. There's just been a brick wall and a bashing of brains. So with that said, I think there are some protections that could be put in place for our cyclists and our pedestrians. I've suggested a few. The main one, of course, I'm right in believing it's a 30-mile-an-hour limit. Surely that could be brought down to 10 miles an hour or 5 or something going through the bridge, and it made clear that it is. If that's already there, I haven't seen it. So with that said, I would certainly support, with those caveats, that the bridge stay open, and that I do respect the cycling community and I do respect the pedestrians, but I think we can find a way forward that suits everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Really appreciated. Okay, so now I'll bring in Councillor Nicola Green. Nicola.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. I have a question, but I'm not sure. Could you confirm whether or not there are officers available to us who might be able to answer a technical question?
Leader, I think both Richard Pincroft and Richard Pearson are on the meeting. I believe they were planning to be.
Yeah, fine. We can just see that. I can't see him on the. Here's Richard. If Richard could, if you are on the meeting, perhaps you could just come on camera. Hello, Richard. Fantastic. Yes, and Councillor, I can now confirm that Mr. Pincroft is with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. In which case, I have somebody to whom to address my question. Good morning, Mr. Pincroft. Clearly, there's a huge amount of documentation in this, and we're very familiar with some of it because we've read it over, well, many months ago, and some of it has come through fresh to this report. And so, what I wanted to ask about was the drive in the campaigns consultants report, that if we tell people who drive through Keyhole Bridge that they have to use other routes instead, that will actually reduce the traffic on Parkstone Road. I think that's the conclusion they arrived, and I guess that's what they're calling traffic evaporation. I have to say it's a new phrase to me. I know what both of those words are, so I presume I understand the concept. And it was really, Mr. Pincroft, if I might just to ask your professional opinion as to whether this outcome really is likely, and if traffic evaporation is a real thing, whether the consultants are actually using it in the right way in this context. Thank you. And then I'd perhaps like to make a comment once I've heard his response.
No, absolutely fine. So perhaps I'll go to Mr. Pincroft now to respond to that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think it's a genuine phenomenon. It does exist, but clearly the sort of local context needs to be taken into consideration. And obviously, in a number of the sort of case studies that have been presented and the report referred to by the group, there's lots of other factors. If you're going to try and create traffic evaporation, you might need to consider much wider measures, which also include bus priority and other alternative options. And in the context of this, I mean, when you think about the physical geography of Poole and this location, the alternative route really is Parkstone Road to the bridge closure. So, I mean, I don't know if that kind of answers your question, Councillor Green. To be honest, without actually physically trialling it and doing it and monitoring it thoroughly, you're not really going to have ever a true answer. But it all comes down to the local context. In this instance, as I said, I'm just repeating myself now, to be honest with you, that the only real alternative for those journeys between those sort of wider network areas is Parkstone Road to the Keyhole Bridge for motor vehicles, of course.
Thank you, Lydia, and thank you, Mr. Pincroft, for that response. I know it's a very difficult question. It's very clear to me that there is only one alternative route, isn't there? We've got sea on the other side. There is simply no other set of alternatives. So obviously, I won't challenge the academic study at the point that it was made. And I think we need to recognise that that was 2 decades ago, and therefore the evidence collected would have been, historic to that, nor indeed their methodology. But I have to say, I find it really challenging, based on the answer that Mr. Pincroft's given, what we see elsewhere, what we know of behaviour, and indeed the pressing needs of the current cost of living challenges facing our residents and businesses who really need to be able to get out and about. And I don't see that an assumption that that will all go away if we close Keyhole Bridge, I'm afraid. I had to say I am a user of active travel through this area, and of course I recognise some of the benefits cited in the reports. I think we all understand why it is that people feel as strongly as they do. However, I am less persuaded by some of the assumptions, and certainly not by the conclusions that I find in this this new piece of work. I mean, you know, council does clearly support a drive to a reduction in congestion and bus priorities. We discussed this. It was a very full and a very complete debate, I think, in council last week. But I do not see that the this approach of the proposed alternative to option A is really taking us in the right direction in the wider context. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. I'll now go to Councillor Duff, Bobby.
Thank you, and I wondered also if I could obtain a professional opinion from an officer, maybe Mr. Pincroft, as someone with an understanding of local context, and especially with respect to alternative routes. Perhaps if Mr. Pincroft is happy.
Sorry, I missed that.
That's okay. So my question, Mr. Pincroft, if you don't mind me directing it to yourself, is with vehicles being diverted, presumably the majority using Parkstone Road, it's just trying to understand the impact on that road and potentially the other roads with respect of unintended consequences, and especially road safety that we could potentially see if the road, if the bridge was to be closed to motorised vehicles.
I think obviously the content of the report is pretty clear on that. I mean, essentially, if you put more volume through a route in terms of traffic volume, you're more likely to have an accident on that route. But without really a much longer trial, you wouldn't really know the true outcome of that. And I think, you know, the report is fairly balanced in that regard. It does cite that there obviously were some accidents during the trial when the closure was in place on the alternative route, but it wasn't really of a significant or a long enough duration to sort of draw any sort of firm conclusions from that.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll perhaps come down to Councillor Green now to come back and respond to some of those comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. This has been quite varied, so I'll do so. In apologies if I miss some bits of it. Maybe I'll sort of go up from the bottom a little bit. I think if for Councillor Dove, I think the report, as Ms. Pincroft has noted, does point out there were 2 collisions on Parkstone Road during the closure, which actually resulted in 3 casualties. Over the 5 years previous to the report coming through, there were 22 casualties. I'm trying to do this from memory. There were 22 casualties, I think, on Parkstone Road, including 5 serious with a fatality. There were only 2 on the road in Poole Park, one of which was near the bridge, which resulted in a slight injury only. So I think what Mr. Pincroft is saying, which is clearly the case, is that if you push more traffic towards a congested, faster route, it is likely that you will get more serious accidents. Going on to what Councillor Butt was talking about, I think she's right that there are opportunities to look at different measures which might make things a little bit safer. I think certainly on highways, the lowest speed that we can allow is 20 mile per hour. There are no provisions for 10 mile an hour or 5 mile an hour routes. But having said that, I think anybody who is going through Keyhole Bridge at a speed over 20 mile per hour, well, I don't know how you could physically do it. Whether there are opportunities through mirrors, etc., certainly is something that could be looked at. The other point about there being no new evidence in the second analysis, I'm not sure that that's quite true. Officers were able to identify, and they're in the report, I think it's page 144 onwards, some other themes that came through, although a lot of it was about how it was unfair that that this group or that group or whatever had been involved. But there are extra ones, and particularly the new evidence that's come forward, I think, are those two analyses of the economic costs and benefits. So I do think that it's been useful in that way, and I think it is important that we look into it carefully. Looking at something that both Councillor Hadley and Councillor Barron brought up was about what the public views on it were, and certainly it is. I think it is fair to say that the two consultations both showed a majority view in favour of closure from the respondents, but it's also true to say that there were a significant number on either side. In fact, maybe it shows a little bit about how weird consultations can be. In the second one, you'll see that it's split out, and they do have the results in here, that when you asked about keeping the road open, 41% said yes and 58% said no. But when you asked about closing it, 65% said yes and 35% say no. So I think what you can basically suggest is it's likely to be something like 38 to 40% of the respondents thought it should be open and 60 to 62% thought it should be closed. I think that's probably a fair way to look at it. But one of the reasons that's not necessarily inconsistent with what Councillor Barron said is that when you look at the breakdown of those who responded to that second consultation, 79% of them owned a bike and 3% further had access to a bike. So 82% of those respondents had access to a bike. When you look at the country, and it may be different in BCP, it may be different in Poole, it may be different in the area around Keyhole Bridge, but the average for the country is only 42%. I think it makes sense that those who have a bike are probably more likely to favour closure than those that don't have a bike. We haven't got the exact breakdown for it, but my gut feeling is, given that massive difference, that the population response was not representative of the public as a whole, and that it's likely that if you did go scale it up in the same sort of way as you would with an opinion poll or something, where you ask people and you base it on previous voting, then it's likely not to show that same sort of difference of 62 to 38 or whatever. So I think they actually probably are both correct in that way. Councillor Anderson's point is actually sort of got me for a slightly different way. Councillor Anderson from this said that about 900,000 people visit Poole Park every year. The presumption that comes from the modelling that KMC forward is that there would be an additional brand new 1 million trips a year by cycle or foot. Exclude those by car. So we wouldn't just be talking about a doubling of those coming into Poole Park. Remember, I've got to say it again, I know I said it earlier, these have to be genuinely new trips to generate that. This is somebody who gets to Keyhole Bridge and go, you know what, it's closed, so I'm not going to bother going out, instead of saying I'll go onto Whitecliffe Park. You know, we have to decide whether we think that is realistic or not, and there will be another 1 million trips that otherwise a person would have stayed at home or used the car. Because if the answer is no, we don't think that, then the economic benefit that's suggested by the KMC report is unrealistic. And when we come to Councillor Nicola Green's question about traffic Reparation, and thank you again, Mr. Pincroft, for the report. I think, and I don't want to put words into Mr. Pincroft's mouth, but I think what he was saying is that when you look at the reports and the studies, like the Cairns report in 2002, which said that traffic evaporation is a thing, and it came out with some numbers. They were talking about blocking or stopping traffic or restricting traffic on the main route and making adjustments to make sure that it doesn't go elsewhere in the network. Well, in this case, what's being proposed is to stop traffic going through a minor route while leaving the main route and all the other alternatives open. And so it just seems to me as though it is not quite right to apply those sort of figures to something that where it really probably doesn't relate. I'm not saying it doesn't. And let's be clear, traffic evaporation, to my mind, is a thing. What we're basically saying, and this actually comes down to the debate that we had in council last week or whenever it was, about the genuine political debate that exists between some people, and I hope I'm not doing them a disservice, but I believe if you come to Councillor Hadley and said, do you believe that it would be right for us to make it as difficult as possible, not as difficult as possible, more difficult for people to drive, because that will promote modal shift, then Councillor Hadley would probably say, yes, he does. I believe more in the carrot and the stick, and I believe that there's more of a balance, but it is a genuine argument that could be put forward. So does traffic evaporation exist? Yes. If we were to say, we are going to stop people travelling into the centre of Poole or whatever by car, or we're going to make sure that it costs much more, or that we're going to make sure, as this would, that there are more and more delays on that route, then yes, it would work that way. That's not the way that I want it to be. And again, I've just got to come back to the very basic maths on that. What they're saying is that take out, when you take 1,700 going on that road and 500 going on that road, and you stop the 500, it comes out as 1,500. Well, that to me does not make sense in this case. And actually, just to say, they also say it will happen in the opposite direction as well, even though that's not congested. So in my opinion, the analysis that's been put forward by Dorset Council seems to make a lot more sense. I think we've been through the other factors as well. It should be pointed out that those analyses and the numbers that come up also include health benefits, greenhouse gas benefits, and I accept that it was, I didn't look at that in such a scientific way in the first consultation in response to it, as we've been directed to by these two reports. So I thank them for that. But I hope I've answered most of those. I don't know whether there's any more points. Otherwise, I'll make a recommendation if you would like, Leader.
Yeah, we were at the part now where it's a cabinet discussion effectively, and we don't have any other cabinet showing. So perhaps you'd like to do that, Mike.
In that case, based on everything that I've said, based on ensuring that we've listened to all sides of the argument and all of the evidence that's been produced, I believe that we should go for option A, to keep the Keyhole Bridge open. I don't believe that option B, which is to go for a further trial of the ETRO, is sensible. I think we've had all the information that we are likely to get. This has gone on for an awful long time, and I do note that the consultation this time round was really quite very much against going for option B, so I wouldn't present that. And I believe that option C does little to improve air quality, or if it does, it improves it in one place at the expense of another. I think there are balanced arguments on road safety, but I have to take the data and suggest that it is more likely, on balance, probably that closing the bridge to motorised traffic would lead to displaced traffic and therefore to greater danger. And I believe that the figures that have come from the Dorset Council are more representative. So I would favour option A, which is to keep the bridge open to traffic, rather than option B or option C. And I'd like to move that, please, Leader. I don't know if you can second that.
Yeah, very happy for that to be moved. I'll just check with Democratic in terms of the reasons for that decision, if we're happy we've got those. Great, and I'll come to anybody who would like to second on it. I'll bring in Councillor Kelly. Jane.
Thank you very much, Leader. And I'd like to start by thanking Councillor Green, his the transport team, and of course all the myriad residents who contributed to the consultations over the last couple of years. I think we've been talking about this. It's been a huge piece of work, and The arguments are very balanced on both sides. I think we've heard all of it today, and we've been able to make our own conclusions from that. I'm really pleased that the health and well-being of residents and visitors has been considered during all this. Things like air quality and also people's access to the park, because obviously different cohorts of people have different ways of getting there. You know, some prefer to be in the car, they're more elderly and vulnerable and less abled would prefer that, and others want to cycle. It's really difficult to balance those needs from people, but I think on balance, you know, we have come to a good option, and I would like to support formally second option A being our choice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So that's proposed and seconded. I think we've had a really a decent debate and discussion about that, and I absolutely echo Councillor Kelly's points around the detail that's been gone into both for officers and members of the public as well. And I think it was I believe it was Councillor Nicola Green initially talking about it's obvious that this administration has a really clear ambition around active travel, and you know the work we're doing across that is really important. So you know it's just about getting that balance right and bringing people with us as we're moving to that. You know, your travel, your choice, and the level of feeling in this discussion that has been quite stark at different points, but then you have to come back to the detail and what's in the paper, which we do, and I concur actually with you, Councillor Green, in relation to the Dorset working document as well. So yeah, I'm perfectly happy to support that recommendation. Are there any other Cabinet colleagues who would like to come in and discuss that? Okay, then in that case, what I'll do is I'll move that to the vote then. So just to be clear for everybody, we're going to, we have option A, keep Whitecliff Road open as it is at present, proposed and seconded. So all those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that, colleagues. Okay, so now we'll move to agenda item 9, economic development strategy skills plan. Formally, I'll propose that, and I believe Councillor Nicola Green is seconding.
Happy so to do.
Thank you very much. And then we'll go to our lead member for Levelling Up, Councillor Johnson, Toby, who's going to introduce the paper. Toby.
Thank you very much, Leader. So yes, very happy to bring this skills plan to Cabinet. It's been a long time in the making. It's been a lot of work, and firstly, just a couple of thanks to go out. Firstly, to the Dorset LEP, particularly Mira Kosovo and Rebecca Davis, who've produced this very high level, very high quality and streamlined document that sector leads can use and rely on at a strategic level. That's something that I personally wanted to see. I didn't want it to be a watered down document. I wanted it to be something that sector leads could use and rely on at that strategic level for a long time to come, certainly for the life of the policy. Also, a huge amount of thanks to our officers who've worked tirelessly to ensure this is a document that will be functional and is of the right tone, structure and content to be able to be relied upon by those who need it. They were also able to organise, alongside Bournemouth University, a fantastic event with sector leads that allowed us to gather vital information that played into the creation of this document. So one thing I want to touch on is why we felt it was necessary to bring this plan forward. And in the report, you'll see there is a list of statistics there that are quite stark when it comes to our skills offering, and I want to just pick out a few of those. So the first is that our wages are 8% lower than national average. We've also got a lower average in terms of the people living here who have a degree level qualification or higher, and that one to me is, I think, the most stark one, given that we have 3 top-class universities here, and the number of people who live within our conurbation is below average in terms of the number of them who have that degree level qualification. And I won't read out all those stats because they're quite clear in the report. But what they do clearly say is that something has got to be done, and that's exactly what this plan is for. And so the plan itself is split up into 4 priorities. You've got the sustainable productivity, attraction, retention and driving up aspiration, and all those 4 are designed to tackle one aspect each of what is a very complicated issue, complicated problem. Skills gaps have been well covered over the past couple of years. Thinking of truck drivers is an obvious example. And all these priorities were very, very well received at that consultation / launch event that I mentioned earlier that was done in conjunction with Bournemouth University. The plan will be supported by the UK Shared Prosperity Fund money, which I'll talk about a little bit more in the next report. It does not commit the council to any further financial burden. What this is about is working smarter rather than harder or more expensively. It's about adapting our offering and working with the various sectors, giving them some guidance in what we would like to see from them and what help we can give them in providing organised and high-level skills support. So the next steps, the big next step is going to be the action plan, which is being drafted and is close to being ready pending approval of the skills plan today. There will also be tailored action plans to support selected partners who have a larger role to play in all of this, for example, Bournemouth University. Big headlines from it include the Careers Expo, which will be going on early in the new year, the £700,000 for the 24-25 year exclusively for our skills projects, thanks again to that UK SPF allocation, and also helping to continue some of the vital careers work that is currently run but is losing some of its protection, thanks to the reorganisation of the LEP and other things as well. And this plan will help us to maintain our offering and improve it no end. And just to touch a little bit on the wider benefits, so the Equalities Impact Assessment wholly supported the plan. Sound skills planning will help to reduce pay gaps, gender inequality, familial income inequality, and all sorts of other inequalities that plague our conurbation at this moment. This is about collaboration between the sectors, helping schools to support their students down all possible pathways, helping the sectors to help the parents to be aware of all of those pathways, and to help sectors including businesses, education providers and the council to ensure that our skills needs are provided for and all children have a level playing field from which to achieve their full potential. Obviously, this also links in very well with our levelling up agenda, particularly with the goals mentioned in the report, as well as the government's levelling up missions from the white paper, particularly numbers 1 to 3. You know, the big point from this is we cannot fix a problem if we don't know what the problems are. And this skills plan has already highlighted many areas that must now be tackled head on, and that is what we will be doing. So I thank Cabinet for their support and I commend it to you. Thank you, Leader.
Absolutely fantastic, and really appreciate the depth of work that's come through, and it's such an important area for us to get right effectively. And if we have genuine ambition, you know, big plan ambitions for our place, then that absolutely starts with the skills agenda. Okay, do I have any colleagues wishing to wider council colleagues wishing to come in at this point? Not seeing that, so we move to any discussion debate with Cabinet, and I'll come first to Councillor Broadhead. Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. And again, just much to Councillor Toby Johnson for being the lead on this. We recognised really early in our administration that levelling up and skills was going to be a key priority for the government. I think we're the first council in the country to appoint a dedicated cabinet lead member for levelling up. And I think the outcome of that decision is pretty clear in the reports that we see. I think Toby mentioned you know, a number of the reasons why we try and get ahead of these thorny issues. First of all, you don't know what you don't know, and as he points out, you need to know where the problem areas are in order to start fixing them. And what I love about these deep dives into the areas, it really shows some of the issues that we've got in the area, and you can see it in paragraph 5. You know, we have a third of our workforce that is looking to retire in the next 15 years. That's a pretty chunky number when you look at it. I won't be, by the way, unfortunately. Well, you know. And also we've got fewer young people entering the workplace in the next 15 years at the same time. So that's those two things are a relative perfect storm. A number of people leaving the workplace at precisely the time that fewer younger people are trying to enter the workplace as well, and that is problematic. And it also says in that area that we have a downward trend in the number of adult participation in learning as well. So they're the areas that we need to address. But I think what we also try to do in this skill plan that Toby and the team have been working on are identify areas of opportunity as well. And as Councillor Johnson pointed out, we've got 3 stellar universities in our area. We've also got really strong partnerships with our further education partners as well. And, you know, a testament to that, in the last couple of weeks, Bournemouth and Poole College have just launched their green skills plan, looking at areas of opportunity. You know, we can and should be a leader in skills in the green area. So it's not just about sustainable skills in the future, but also looking to areas of opportunity as well. So it's really good to have this background information of areas that we need to improve. But what I really like about the putting those priorities forward and this action plan is that now we've got a direction of travel and also seeking out those areas of opportunity. We won't be delivering that as a council. It will be in collaboration with very many of our partners. And, you know, final point from me, and I think I've said this before in Cabinet, one of the things that I've always been struck with is when we talk to our stakeholders, when we talk to community groups, and when we talk to businesses, there is no paucity of desire to improve the skills situation across the BCP region. In fact, we're riddled with people that actually really want to get involved. Where I think we've been lacking is an area is trying to pull that together and also trying to focus on where that definition should be pointed towards. I think this is a really positive step in that, and you know, I'm really pleased to see it come forward and see where it goes from here. So thank you for all the work.
Great, thank you. Okay, appreciated comments there. Okay, fine. So, do we have any other colleagues wish to speak on this paper? Not seeing that. So, Toby, anything you'd like to say in terms of summing up before we take the recommendations?
Thank you, Leader. Just to expand a little bit on Councillor Broadhead's point about that collaborative working, I think that one thing that is really important about this skills plan is it's not something that we developed on our own. I think we started as we mean to go on from here, and the fact that it's been put together by us in collaboration with the LEP and with Bournemouth University shows that it'll continue in that same vein. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you. So effectively, the recommendation in front of us is to approve the skills plan. So all those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Great, thank you. Okay, and I believe then, so we're now moving on to agenda item 10, which is the levelling up, progress report, which we've had trailed earlier on today, and also does link in really nicely with the economic development strategy there as well. Technically, I'm proposing, and I believe again, Councillor Nicola Green is seconding. Yeah, great, thank you, and we'll come back to our lead member for levelling up to introduce the paper. Toby.
Thank you again, Leader. So, regarding this one, this is a paper that again has been a very long time in the work, pretty much a year of non-stop background working. And the reason it's taken so long, the reason why the first item in my little speech here will be another set of thank yous to the officers and the people we've worked with, is that this is a report that is absolutely groundbreaking. It is not a piece of work that has been done before. We are absolutely leading the way across the country with our work on this. So the first vote of thanks absolutely has to go to both our economic development team and our policy team. The work of both have been absolutely invaluable, and indeed some of the metric work that's been done in this report has been envied by the councils across the country who've looked to do similar things since we've done this. So I think that in a time when officers often don't get the recognition, I'd like to make it clear that that's the first recommendation in this paper, which is to condone the work of officers, is absolutely not a token gesture. It is what I think is a real recognition of some incredible work that they've done. And I will talk shortly about This Is Purpose, the group that we worked with to create this. But firstly, I think it's certainly an example here of what happens when everyone involved, officers and the political side of things, are pulling in the same direction, and that's actually been the case with me over the last year. So moving on to This Is Purpose, who are the co-authors of the report. They've been an extremely valuable partner, and they've provided us with some superb support and insight and high quality work that's fed into this alongside our officers. We're very proud to have helped them shape their local government offering as one of the very first councils to be part of their councils coalition, which is now spread to many others. They've been very receptive to our needs and willing to adjust their approach in order to adapt to the intricacies of our conurbation, as opposed to other areas where levelling up might be a more well-travelled subject, and also very receptive to the idiosyncrasies as to the very needle-point nature of what is needed from levelling up within our conurbation, and I hope we'll work with them a lot more going forward. So to now go into the report process and levelling up in and of itself, this is, like I say, a year's worth of collaboration, information gathering, discussion and listening that's led into this. It all started in January or February, I believe, with an all-member briefing with council, to which Justine Greening, who heads up the Purpose Coalition, provided an excellent introduction that really set the tone for our work. And the difference between January and now is really quite stark within the council. We now include levelling up in our quarterly reports. It's clearly seeping into our corporate thinking, which will continue next year with guidance to be produced by myself and officers for our staff as to what levelling up means for them, how they should seek to apply levelling up to their data interactions, and making it clear that it's not something new or extra, another thing that they have to add to their workload, just a way of ensuring that the impact of the work they already do is maximised in the right places and with the right people who need it most. You know, we want to make it clear that levelling up is not intrinsically linked to government support and or funding. We have done all of this work, frankly, without it. It's a testament to the fact that levelling up is now an extremely successful brand name, if you will, for work that is absolutely not political or arguable. It's work that we should continue. It's work that should continue, be it under the levelling up banner or whatever slogan this government or the next one comes up with. However, it is noted that in the report that as part of our work, we have secured our UK Shared Prosperity Fund allocation of £4.2 million to be spread across the next 3 years. There'll be more detail on that particular one in a more specific paper in the new calendar year. That's because we received confirmation of receipt of that money after the finalisation of this report. Levelling up has already been a success just by ensuring that the people in charge are talking about the problems that it addresses. And now onto the report itself. There are many areas to be positive on, but crucially also some areas for improvement. It's nice to see there's only one goal that is in the red, which is goal 7, which is regarding access to savings and financial advice. And that's due to many things, a below average GVA, below average median weekly pay, and an above average percentage of low paying jobs, which as I talked about in the last paper with the skills plan, that's something we're already working on combating. Now, those that are green should be absolutely praised, and we should be lauded for our work on those, and those that are yellow should be carefully monitored. However, those that are green must also be taken with a pinch of salt. One thing I've been very clear about is that this is not a pat on our own back. This is at the start of something much bigger. You know, we live in a conurbation with a high differential between the most wealthy and those who are the most deprived within our conurbation. We cannot become complacent just because it averages out well in some of these areas. For example, our life expectancy, this is a stat that I have had to roll out on a few occasions just because it still shocks me, quite frankly. We may be above average in males overall, but we know that this differs greatly across our conurbation. As published in January's paper, there is a 10-year difference between our most deprived areas and our least deprived areas. And that may average out well, but it's something that we have to be mindful of. We can't forget that there is still clearly a problem there in certain areas of our conurbation. Now, I don't want to go into too much further detail about the report itself, because I don't want to draw people's conclusions for them. I do hope people will read the report for themselves, because it's a really interesting read. It's a really positive read overall. Now, Councillor Trent has, who I believe is online virtually, has expressed his concern regarding the provision of youth support for 1 to 5-year-olds in an email this morning. As a ward colleague, I'm acutely aware of the problems regarding youth provision as seen particularly in our ward. So I hope that Councillor Trent will rest assured that these problems are taken very, very seriously. He did suggest a recommendation. However, I'm not prepared to add a recommendation at this short notice. We only received the email 45 minutes before the start of the meeting. But please be assured that this is one of our priorities, and this is clearly reflected in our commitment to the levelling up goals. It is one of them, and we look forward to working towards keeping it as a very important priority. And again, just to finish up, again, importantly, this is not a pat on our own back. You know, we know there is more work needed, but reports like this can show us where we should focus. You know, we can target our resources in the necessary places, which is what levelling up is all about. What we are doing is leading the way in this way of thinking, and we will continue to proudly level up our towns. And I commend this report to Cabinet, and I hope that you will join me in congratulating those involved in its creation. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, absolutely delighted to do that, and we were really pleased when we were discussing the role, you know, levelling up role. Do we really want to engage in this? This is exactly, you know, the reason why we wanted to do it and what we wanted to see. So absolutely join you in that, and our thanks and congratulations to you for your work on it as well. Okay, I believe we have got Councillor Tony Trent looking to, showing. So Tony, I'll bring you in. Afternoon.
Right, thank you. I put that extra recommendation in based on a lot of experience in the area and how much residents and people have had to fight to keep what they've got. And it worries me, and you know, congratulations, by the way, on getting the earmarked funding to see this through. But what I don't want BCP to do is to skip merrily down a bright, shiny new road and actually overlook what's already being provided and what works. And we have still got youth services, although not as universal as it should be. And in fact, where youth provision exists, it's less than it was at the beginning of the austerity, and even where it was 7 years ago. But we need to make sure that we hang on to what works. So I've highlighted that we shouldn't make any further cuts or reductions to youth services, and that we should look to improving that, because anybody who is involved will know that young people that are engaged, that are able to pursue their interests, are more able to develop and contribute positively to their future. And I highlighted in an email I sent, which unfortunately I couldn't send last night because of technical problems, but you know, I have case studies where people have benefited majorly from getting that chance at a young age to pursue interests, and it works at all levels. The other thing I pointed out, and I would invite anyone to word it better, is that it's well established that what happens with youngsters before they reach the age of 5 and before they go to school is so important. And to get the best out of young children and to maximise their abilities, we often need to support the parents. Now, we do have services that support these, but again, you've had a bumpy road in the past. A lot of the early years centres disappeared, but it's actually maximising the ability of a youngster starting school to be able to make the best of that. So I just basically picked on 2 areas which I think should be maintained and enhanced to maximise the potential of our young people. And I do believe that the extra point D would at least reassure people like myself who fear for the future of some of these services that these services aren't going to be chopped, because we need to add to what we've got, not take away what we've got to save a bit of money in the short term, only to you know, find that we need it later on. Hopefully I've explained it well enough, but you know, I would very much like the Cabinet to consider my point D, even if it's reworded to make a little bit more sense if it doesn't make sense, because it's a basic, simple proposal, and one which I hope can be accepted.
Thank you very much, Tony. I'm not seeing any other wider members of council showing, so I will come in to Phil Broadhead, Mike White, and then see if Toby Johnson would like to sum up. Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. And look, I really appreciate the points that Councillor Trent has made, as I'm sure we all do. I don't think any of us here would like to not see the increased and improved position for young people. So whilst I think it's probably a little bit too late to insert it as another recommendation, as Councillor Johnson mentioned, it's absolutely firmly within our plans. And actually, I think if you take the last paper and this paper together, the very fact that it's been identified that there is, real opportunities for an increased provision for young people and skills and growing that, I think underlines our commitment to that. Two really small points from me. First of all, again, mentioned this in the last paper, but I think it's really positive again to see in the main report, the addendum to this, the huge amounts of data. I can be a data nerd, so I will admit that in advance, but it is really helpful to see which areas we perform better at or worse at than some of our contemporaries across the UK. There's a whole section on that because that really helps you to drive that informative-led approach to know which areas that you tackle. Those that haven't taken time to read the report, I would urge them to have a look at that. I think it's really interesting. Justine Greeding's introduction as well, I think, is a great. It should be put forward by our tourism department. It's a great summary of the great area that we live in BCP as well. But I think those metrics are incredibly useful. Second point for me was just to underline Councillor Johnson's welcoming of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund that we've now heard back from government, and thank you very much to government for agreeing our investment plan alongside the £1.9 million multiply, which is helping to improve adult numeracy skills. All the more important considering what we heard in the last report, where we've seen that reduction in older people or non-young people getting involved in learning as well. So I think both of those things together will be really useful. What we will be doing is we are currently finalising a date at the moment, which I think will be in early January, for a all councillor workshop to look at the investment plan that we've had approved by government, which we had to do really quickly actually, which are focusing on 3 areas of priorities: communities in place, supporting local businesses, more key now than ever before, and people and skills, to have a workshop with all councillors, figure out exactly what our collective plans should be in that area, how to really make a difference in those areas, but also to recognise that all of us, elected officials as well as the community and everyone, has a part to play in that as well. So I'll be doing that workshop in early January so that we can get as many ward councillors involved in trying to take this money that we've got from government and really getting the best bang for the buck. So another really good report, a lot of work to do, but I think it's the start of a very exciting journey. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you for continuing on. I was trying to plug my laptop in, so great. Okay, fine. So I don't believe we've sorry, I do apologise, Councillor Mike White. Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just to come in very quickly in response to Councillor Trent, I'd just like to say that we already have an item on the Cabinet forward plan to review our early help offer. I'm very happy to take on board his comments as part of that review. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely great. Thank you. Okay, so I'll come back to you, Councillor Johnson. Anything you would like to sum up?
Thank you, Lydia. Yes, no, just a couple of points based on what Councillor Trent said. I mean, firstly, obviously, we're not looking to overhaul things that work. That would be totally self-destructive and completely against what we'd be trying to do. As I said, it's about making sure that what we do continues, but that its effects are targeted perhaps more efficiently at the right places, at the right people, and are followed up on, and are not just strings that we allow to dangle aimlessly, waiting for our public to grab them. We have to make sure that they know they're there and that we hand the strings to them if necessary. And regarding the points around the increase in support, if you look at paragraph 13 of the report, the very first goal that we identify as a priority is, and I'll quote, increased support and development opportunities for children and young people. It is goal 1 in terms of the levelling up goals that we subscribe to. It is very much a priority of ours, and it's not something that we take lightly. So I would like to point out that is already in there and is covered by the recommendations. But other than that, I will look for Cabinet support. Thank you, Leader.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. So to be clear then, we have recommendations A through C. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Great. Thank you very much for that, and really appreciate the work that's gone into both of those papers. Okay, so now we move to the Equality and Diversity Policy Review. So I believe I've got Councillor Duff and then Councillor White. Bobby.
Thank you. Leader, our big plan says that we will ensure that BCP area becomes one of the best places in which to live and grow up as a child through the provision of better health and well-being and education from early years through to adulthood. We'll create an environment in which people have the opportunity to flourish and reach their full potential. So a big part of your leadership has been around ensuring that people at the heart of our council and at the very centre of our decision making. And this is demonstrated by the creation of a qualities lead when you first became leader in October 2020, followed by lead member for carers and levelling up in 2021. And we've heard from Councillor Johnson today, which says that we really are pushing the boundaries in so many areas and carrying out work that we haven't done before. And this is the same within our equalities and diversity inclusion work. And this paper is a third in the series of paper which brings about tangible benefits for our residents in BCP. The first step was the equalities footprint. And just to remind people, that is the activities undertaken by the council in accordance with their role that contribute to the delivery of BCP Council's equalities agenda and the duties of the council at individual, team and service levels. The second paper in July introduced measures which ensures that we can demonstrate real life benefits and changes in people's lives. It's all very well having best intentions, but are we truly making a difference into the lives of our residents? So the 6 measures that we're using to evaluate our work was adopted by Cabinet in July 2022. And just as a reminder, they are education, work, living standards, health, justice and personal safety, and participation. So this third paper now consolidates the good work so far and also brings together the legacy policies of our preceding councils. But as always, we've taken this opportunity to increase the reach of our work. And as I said before, really start to make those possible positive, tangible benefits in people's lives. We have protected characteristics prescribed in legislation, but locally we think we can go further to bring about the ambitions of the big plan to fruition. So I'm really pleased to say that today we are adding 3 additionally locally recognised groups within our policy, which will be carers, children in care, and care leavers, or sometimes we refer to them as care experienced children. Councillor Johnson gave us the start measures that shows that we really do have disparity in outcomes for some of our residents, and therefore this paper includes our locally recognised characteristics, which further include within our decision making, so that we can start to bring outcomes closer, no matter what your personal circumstances. And just as a reminder, the recognised locally characteristics that we've adopted will be military veterans, carers, children in care, care experienced young people, socio-economic status, local businesses and community organisations. So Leader, I hope you agree that this is a true demonstration in our commitment to ensure that we really do make a difference in people's lives. And more importantly, to ensure that our future policies bring out an improvement in the outcome for our residents and that they are truly at the heart of our decision making. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I come to Councillor Mike White now as well.
Yeah, I'm really happy to second this, and I very much welcome the proposal that children in care and care experienced young people will be considered in future equality impact assessments for new council policies and strategies. And as corporate parents, I really think that, you know, this is something we should really welcome, the fact that as far as this council is concerned, they will have at least the same opportunities as those from traditional families. I think this is a real step forwards. Can I change the topic slightly and introduce a seasonal comment here? It's Christmas time. While we're on the subject of Christmas corporate parenting, I'd like to point out there's an object next to Councillor Drew Mellor that we'll go to it in a moment. It's a wishing tree created by our children in care and our care leavers, and the wishes which they're putting on this tree will be taken forward as part of a review of our corporate parenting strategy in the new year. So if I turn my mic off and Drew comes in, everyone.
Yes, absolutely, Mike, and I'll just endorse that. Reading through the messages earlier on as well, they're really powerful and a great way to engage and get some of those messages across as well. So thank you for highlighting it. Thank you. Okay, and now I can bring in Councillor Nicola Green. Nicola.
Thank you, Leader, and clearly endorse everything that's been said, particularly Councillor White's comments. But since neither Councillor Rampton nor can I see Councillor Kelsey are here, I'm sure they would both absolutely welcome, as do I, the fact that we are recognising the really crucial role that carers play in supporting so many of our residents across the conurbation, and that the military are also going to be locally recognised. And thank you very much to Councillor Dove for bringing that forward and making sure that the council takes its wider responsibilities so very, very seriously.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So I'm not seeing anybody else come and speak. So is there anything you would like to sum up, or shall we move to Councillor Duff?
Thank you everyone for your comments, and happy to move to the vote, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have the recommendations as put. All those in favour, please show. Yeah, okay, great, fantastic, brilliant. So then we're going to move on now to agenda item 12, which is protecting our coastal open spaces effectively. And I'm really happy to be introducing this item today. We've had some reference to in our last paper to the big plan and our ambitions for how people can thrive, but also enjoy their areas. And right back at our 100-day plan, we were really clear about some of the ambitions we wanted to do in terms of raising for Bar about how people can enjoy the area. We want to maintain that ambition, and we're really clear that the ability to go out and consult on a coastal and open spaces, protecting our coastal and open spaces in terms of PSPO could be a really powerful tool. We've had to look very closely at where we have genuine evidence that there is work that we can actually add to the network and protection of our coastal and open spaces. So really pleased to see this one coming forward. I'm very happy to be leading it, because I think it's not just a community safety issue. This is very much across the remit of a number of our portfolios effectively. And if we can go and consult on this and then go listen to that consultation, we will be able to have the ambition to actually put some items in place which allow us to protect our coast and open spaces more as well. So very happy to see this one coming forward, and perhaps I'll go to Councillor Dove to come in second. Bob.
Thank you, and I'm really pleased to second this paper and support you in bringing this to Cabinet today. Let's be quite clear, it's really monumental. And just to be clear also, this paper wasn't always called the Protecting Our Coastal and Open Spaces paper. Its working title was actually ASUPA PSPO. So the paper follows a series of different support mechanisms that we've put in place under the umbrella of summer response. So just to recap, the summer response started with significant commitment by this administration in the summer of 2021 with a £3.2 million investment, followed by a £1.8 million investment in 2022. And as we've heard in Cabinet last month, we're going to tender for a littering contract where enforcement officers are able to issue fixed penalty notices for the litter bugs that ruin our town, beaches and open spaces. However, despite 2 years of a successful summer response programme, we are always looking to improve our response to support residents, businesses and visitors, and we shall never take our foot off the pedal. So our summer response review notes that there are still some challenges that legislation does not cover. And whilst the majority of residents and visitors in our town are considerate of others, there are a few that spoil it for everyone else. So I am really delighted to describe and introduce our Super PSPO. Never before have we seen plans to deliver PSPO this ambitious. Its far-reaching proposal covers most directorates of the council, includes beaches, and includes our cliff tops and open spaces, and includes our heathlands, which are so very precious to us. So, Leader, going back to our big plan, putting people at the very centre of everything we do, in the heart of our decision making, we've listened to our residents, to our hospitality industry, and our ward councillors, and as a result, we've consulted and we've engaged, and that's what this paper is about and what we're asking Cabinet to do today. The feasibility assessment has identified negative behaviours which meet the legislative criteria for consideration of a PSPO based on consideration of evidence and enforcement options. The introduction of this PSPO is being considered to prohibit such behaviours and thereby creates a strong deterrent which would enable the application of effective enforcement action in a timely manner, exactly as our residents would like us to do. So the next step is to launch a public consultation, which is an essential requirement in considering whether to proceed with any PSPO. And we are proposing that we consult on the following behaviours: overnight stays in tents and or sleeping on the beach and open spaces without landowners' permission, overnight stays in vehicles in car parks and other open spaces, and vehicles would include cars, vans and mobile homes, to light or fuel any open fire or barbecues on beaches and open spaces, littering, to reduce the volume of music or making noise on the beach at levels that have a detrimental effect on the quality of life of those in the locality or is likely to be persistent and continuing in nature, and antisocial behaviour by groups on the seafront. The report seeks approval from Cabinet to continue and conclude the detailed work required for a public consultation and include the final mapping of evidence so that we can define the areas where behaviours are proposed to be prohibited. And the report seeks delegated authority for myself as a portfolio holder for community safety and regulatory services to approve the final consultation documents, which we aim to launch in January 2023. The next steps following the consultation will be a detailed assessment of all responses and a final options appraisal, which will be presented to Cabinet for approval in time for us to adopt the PSPO ahead of the 2023 season, which starts in April. Leader, I ask Cabinet to recommend and approve the recommendations as documented.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great. Okay, so we've got a number of from people from wider council wishing to speak, and the first of those, I believe, actually, we've had a statement from Councillor Slade, who's actually, is she on the call? I haven't seen her showing. Okay, right, brilliant. She is in now. So what would we come first to Councillor Slade, and then Moore and Trent. So good afternoon, Vicky.
Thank you, Leader. I have to leave at 1, so I have other statements submitted later. So I just wanted to make a statement about this proposed PSPO. We all agree that some behaviours undertaken by our visitors clearly have a negative effect on our residents. And when we introduced the PSPO in 2020 to deal with street drinking, we were told at the time that the existence of the bylaws and the seasonal rather than persistent nature of beach camping meant it was not suitable for inclusion. So I'm very pleased that a way forward appears to have been found to overcome this issue. However, another element of the proposed PSPO is draconian and disproportionate, and I think will be difficult or ridiculously expensive to enforce. The LGA guidance around PSPOs states must balance the rights of the community to enjoy public spaces without antisocial behaviour with the civil liberties of individuals and groups who may be affected. The activities and behaviours also need to be severe enough to cause alarm, harassment or distress. So tell me, how does a family taking their barbecue from their beach hut onto the sand, or a group bringing a kettle barbecue, not disposable barbecue, onto the beach to enjoy a winter hot dog constitute antisocial behaviour? We all agree barbecues and fires should be banned from the heathland and on parts of sand close to nature reserves, but this really is a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It may also very unfairly target those who do not have access to a garden or private outdoor space. The costs to enforce such a wide-ranging order are likely to be excessive, and I urge you to remove this element of the PSPO as it will impact on many law-abiding residents and visitors and put undue pressure on beach staff, potentially leading to additional budget pressures for relatively little benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that statement. We now come to Councillor Sandra Moore and then Councillor Tony Trent. So, Sandra, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Leader. Thank you. At a place ONS meeting recently, we did agree a motion that a PSPO will be sought for fire-related activity on heathlands and nature reserves. And at the time, we were told a PSPO had to be drafted and consulted upon. And I am delighted, especially as I'm a Camford Heath Ward councillor, as you know, that this will be included in this PSPO consultation. But I would also add that at the time, the Place Committee did make it clear that to include all open spaces would make life difficult for people who don't have gardens and might want to have a barbecue in a small park, which might well be a perfect place for a barbecue. And of course, we mustn't forget the purpose of a PSPO is to help reduce antisocial behaviour. So this does need a bit of careful thought, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. So I'll come now to Councillor Tony Trent. Tony.
Yeah, mine's on a slightly different topic, so I don't know whether you want to answer that particular issue first and then take me afterwards, because I'm on the littering side.
Yeah, no, Tony, what this part of the meeting is for
Yeah.
people who not
Yeah.
on cabinet to come in. So if you do that now, then I'll ask the portfolio holder if she'd like to respond
Yeah.
immediately or sum up. So please make your points. Thank you.
Yeah, the point I want to make is that some 10 plus years ago, when I was Chair of Environment Scrutiny on the Borough Pool, we actually took an item about litter enforcement to that scrutiny panel. We met various people. I think we met one of the organisations that provided the service, and looked at it in detail. This was cross-party, quite open. I was quite open about the idea and thought it had some merit, but there was a decision that because of the dangers it presented, over enthusiastic enforcement officers, maybe having a following someone pushing the pushchair whose toddler dropped a sweet wrapper or something like that, that it wasn't something they wanted to pursue, and that it was a risky concept. And I'm wondering what's changed in the last 10 years or so that has made this a less risky concept, because I know some authorities were doing it at the time, and but having considered all the evidence, the committee, and as I say, it was totally cross-party, because that's how the scrutiny worked at the time, felt that this wasn't something they were comfortable with doing. So I'm kind of wondering what has changed since then.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Tony. Okay, so Councillor, would you like? I've got a list of cabinet colleagues. Would you like to respond to those questions or do that in your? Or hear the rest of the cabinet debate and then sum up? Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you, Bev. Beverly. Yeah.
Forgive me, I'm just looking up there to see who's speaking. Right. Well, as a portfolio holder for tourism, I really can't tell you how much I welcome this proposed consultation, and I'm confident that I can speak on behalf of the Destination Management Board also welcoming this paper. With lockdown, unfortunately, came a cohort of visitors that we're simply not used to, who show no respect to the town, our seafront, our residents, or our seafront team by displaying some behaviours that are totally unacceptable. The negative effect of this bad behaviour directly affects our 1.2 billion tourism industry, which supports hundreds of businesses and thousands of jobs. They are both creators and dependents of this important part of our economy. They go to great lengths to provide a quality experience, to ensure the sustainability of our tourism industry, and to keep their guests and customers returning with confidence that the high standards they have come to expect are a priority, and that the council is playing its part in eliminating this behaviour for their benefit. We've invested heavily in summer response and have been successful, but it's very costly, puts high demands on our staff, and it's time we take it to the next level. And I thank Councillor Dove for bringing this paper forward and bringing everything together. And I'm sure our residents will be delighted to see it, and I hope they will all take part in the consultation. Thank you, Leader.
Absolutely, thank you very much. Okay, we've got Councillor Mark Anderson. Mark.
Thank you, Leader. I really welcome this. As Councillor Donovan said, we share the seafront, and it's one of the issues we have on the seafront is that antisocial behaviour, and also the effect it has on the seafront, the cliffs and the open spaces. But I particularly wanted to talk about the consultation and just ask if Councillor Dove can make sure that all the beach hut associations are directly contacted for consultation, because one of the issues they have raised in the consultation and engagement I've had with them over my paper is about their concerns of antisocial behaviour coming from people who are subletting beach huts and the noise and the various other activities that are taking place. So if we can get their views on this. I think it will help strengthen the general comments of that, and it will also help with the some of the concerns of the beach hut associations as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mike White. Oh, sorry, Mike Green. Apologies.
Thank you. Going colourblind again, leader. Thanks ever so much. I really welcome this paper, particularly from my portfolio point of view, regarding the overnight sleeping in cars and camper vans. It's been a really tricky item for us, both as BCP and previously, I know, in Bournemouth. We've got a variety of different attempted controls, whether it's cars and solo motorcycles only restrictions, or some of the legacy pool stuff which talks about no overnight camping, etc., and overnight sleeping. It really is so tricky from a highways perspective to enforce. And I'm very hopeful that as we go forward with the PSPO in this way, a comprehensive one, taking into account a number of offences, then this will be swept into it. And finally, we're going to be able to stop some of the vehicles that are camped out for nights, for weeks, for months sometimes, on the cliff tops particularly. And I think that will really help our residents when they no longer have to deal with the fallout of those.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kelly, Jane.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, I too welcome this paper. Absolutely fantastic. And such a lot of work has gone into it, I know, to make it as tight as possible and able to be enforced once we've been through the consultations and maybe tweaked it a little bit if necessary. From my community's point of view, I've had, and I know my colleagues have as well, had many complaints which encompass various of these types of antisocial behaviour. But I just wanted to talk about the littering a little bit, in that we have so many wonderful volunteers across BCP, not least with the Dorset Devils, who do a lot of work in tidying up and picking up litter along streets and on cliff tops and many places. And, you know, they often say, why do people do this? Why do they think it's okay? Well, once this has gone through the processes and it's in place, we are absolutely clear it is not okay. And we hope that this will stop some of the littering that goes on. So thank you, Councillor Dove, for this.
Thank you very much. So that's the end of the list we've got effectively. Just a couple of, before I perhaps pass back to you, Councillor Dove, just a couple of points I'd make. I think it was interesting to hear from, you know, and we appreciate the comments through, but particularly when we're talking about, you know, barbecue and the provision there and the ability for people who perhaps don't have gardens and want to be able to use the seafront. Well, when we've made a really quite strong commitment around delivering free to use barbecues across the seafront and how popular they're being by all sections of society. So it's a little bit, you know, we've got to work to do it properly, you know, and we're absolutely trying to achieve that. And in the paper we've got coming up in a minute, the really strong, massive investment, you know, we'll be bringing forward if we approve that paper along the seafront as well. You know, enables us to still have that really high level of ambition around what we're going to deliver, you know, for our residents and what we can deliver free for, you know, for some residents as well. But we need to do it in a way that in respect to high level of standards of the place, you know, and we believe this is one of the most fantastic parts of the country. And we, you know, we need to do what we can do to make sure that visitors and, you know, and residents are able to enjoy it to the standard that it should be shown off as well. So that's why I'm really quite pleased to see this coming forward, and thank you for your work on it. Councillor Dove, is there anything you would like to add before we take this to the vote?
Yes, thank you. Relittering, I understand Councillor Trent's concerns. I would ask him to listen to Cabinet last month, where we discussed this in depth, including the sureties that any action will be proportionate and is a key feature of that tendering process to ensure that the litter bugs will be found and dealt with, but equally we're not going in too heavy-handed. In response to Councillor Slade, she should really know that a PSPO implementation is fully based on evidence, and it has a really high threshold to reach. And officers have been working on this evidence gathering across the board since the summer, just to make sure that we really understand the challenges that have been raised to us. These issues that have been put forward are all issues that have been raised to us by residents, by visitors, by businesses, and as such, we will consult on it. I'm not going to fall into the habit of the previous administration where Vicky Slade was leader of the council, and it was the mantra that they always knew best and they did to other people. This administration is one where we will listen to people and any decisions made will be fully evidenced and fully consulted upon. So yes, absolutely, would like to go out for consultation, understand the views of our residents, and I would ask that any councillors also respond to the consultation so that their views can be considered too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Really good and decent debate and discussion on that. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's take that to the recommendations as put. All those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so now we're moving on to thank everybody for their patience. It's obviously been a very long agenda today, but we've got two main items to come. Agenda item 13 now, provision of beach huts. So, Councillor Anderson, I believe you're going to be introducing the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'm grateful for the Beach Hut Association chairman for coming today and expressing their views on the proposals. We held 3 engagement meetings during October with representatives from each Beach Hut Association and received feedback on factors which were important to them. This has helped influence and shape the proposals. We have listened carefully to concerns and considered their proposals to implement only an inflationary increase to all prices and any other charges. The proposed paper seeks to introduce a better and more understandable pricing structure for the council's beach huts. The pricing structure covers a 5-year period which will reduce the immediate impact and allow owners and tenants to plan ahead, as well as allowing for the reduction in price bands from over 30 to 9. The aim is to group different blocks of beach huts together based on market demand, quality of access, local facilities and maintenance requirements. If approved, the report will allow the simplification of the transfer fees. Currently, each area has a different system, and will introduce a single eligibility policy that is fair and equitable to all BCP residents. So anyone who lives in BCP can have a beach hut where they want, not constrained by the artificial barriers we currently have. The current system means only Bournemouth residents can have a beach hut in Bournemouth. In Poole, only residents whose only or primary residence is in Poole. And in Christchurch, under legacy arrangements, Christchurch huts can only be taken by people with no connection to this area. This this paper aims to correct that anomaly and to bring our local assets back to the benefit of local people. Waiting lists will be open to all residents who live in the BCP area. So if there's a hut available, it won't matter where you live anymore. The paper will also allow seafront services to improve the work they do. It will ensure sufficient funds are available for maintenance. This is maintenance across the whole board, not only beach huts, but toilets, catering, infrastructure. So all residents have access to our beaches, and along with tourists, can be justifiably proud of our world-class beaches and facilities. To put some of these costs in context, it typically costs over £250,000 to refurbish a toilet block or a block of beach huts. We want to reinvest and improve the seafront and also increase the staffing levels. I want to increase the beach ranger patrols so the beaches and seafront are safer for all to use. And as we've heard, we want to introduce a PSPO to cover this as well. I will repeat the promise I made to the chairs of each beach hut association, where I told them I understand their concerns on maintenance, and if they provide me with a list of maintenance priorities, I will see that these are added to the seafront list and also incorporated into the maintenance programme. Over the 5-year harmonisation term, the council will be investing an additional £4.4 million in revenue funding into beach huts, seafront services and ancillary facilities. Some of this will be used to support capital borrowing, so we can unlock a potential of tens of millions of pounds of investment across the whole of the BCP seafront and deliver on the council's big plan and seafront strategy commitments. The changes proposed are considered fair and reasonable. However, there are a wide range of different ways for people to access the service and enjoy continued use of beach huts, should affordability for some licence be affected. BCP Council has been in existence for 3.5 years, and it's time we implemented a system which harmonises the service, provides a quality of access, raises maintenance standards and improves commercial performance. I'd also like to say that some of the comments that have been made in the papers about the large increases in percentage rises, maybe they should be looking at the actual increase. The cost for an increase in Friars Cliff is 26%. That's correct, but it's also only £200 per annum, so a reasonable increase, I would suggest. And also, I therefore ask Cabinet to accept the recommendations and approve this report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mark. I've got Councillor Dunlop coming in second. Beverly.
Thank you, Leader. I think the seafront is a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. It's got many pieces, and those pieces need to be there in the right place, in the right shape, to see the big picture and to realise the wider benefits. And it is there for everyone to enjoy, rich or poor, resident or visitor, but some elements of it must generate income to keep it all at a high standard, maintain the essential facilities, and to provide further investment to develop this outstanding natural asset and deliver the world-class seafront of our strategic seafront vision. What we must do, though, is have a fair and equitable pricing and charges that are market rates, don't disadvantage BCP residents depending on where they live, or have a multifaceted complex pricing structure that disadvantages some residents whilst benefiting others. So I welcome us embarking on this process of harmonisation, and I'm happy to second this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. Okay, I've got a number of councillors wishing to speak now, so I'll do those in the room first if I can. So that would be Councillor Dedman Leslie, followed by Margaret Phipps, and then as I'll come to those online.
Yes, thank you, Leader, for the chance to speak on this. And yes, thank you, Portfolio Holder, for a very comprehensive paper in which it actually says that after the Beach Hut SVP proposal for the budget was squashed, the administration decided to work on a proposal to harmonise, change the management, and generally, it seems, get money from the Beach Hut estate another way and grow commercial potential is a phrase used in it. And again, just now we've heard generate income. Now, I'm only speaking about our own area, Christchurch and Highcliffe. And you may remember the Muddyford Spit beach huts were formerly included in our bit, and now they're in Bournemouth. I have had a huge number of complaints from residents that the proposal is unfair. And Cabinet members in general, and the portfolio holder in particular, claim the beach hut associations have been consulted throughout over the proposals, and also I've just seen earlier in the week a claim that they actually asked him to get on with the harmonisation, which I gather they say they did not, and also they say that he hasn't listened to the residents' associations and what they consider on this plan. And amongst other complaints on the plan, many of the residents are upset by the thought that it's a time of huge uncertainty over money, that their beach hut gives them a huge amount of pleasure, and I totally agree with Councillor Dunlop. Yes, we've got a wonderful area. It gives them pleasure and solace, and it's so important to health and well-being. And they are not rich people, most of the people over our way, most of the people in this area, as I think we've heard from the previous papers. It may be unaffordable in order to fund BCP's aspirations in other directions. So my point, Leader, is that the whole premise of this proposal seems to be to square the hole caused by the impossibility of the SPV deal by squeezing the pips of the beach huts in another way. It's dressed up as new management and investment. I ask Cabinet to reconsider this whole proposal, which I agree with our residents seems deeply unfair in many, many ways. And certainly I'm very unhappy with item 6 on your recommendations, which is to delegate authority to finalise the changes to the portfolio holder. In other words, to have it delegated to put into place, I would ask you as a Cabinet to please accept that this needs much more work. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we now go to Councillor Margaret Phipps. Margaret.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so at the beginning of the meeting, in public statements, you heard what
some of our residents across the whole of BCP from beach hut associations were saying. I fully support their stance. Well, I note the word harmonisation is being used, and I hope you remember how that worked out last time in Christchurch with proposals about council tax. Now, there'd be no problem with increasing rentals by inflation, a sensible figure that residents could actually afford. But instead, what we have here is a 5-year plan which appears to use beach hutters, or those with beach huts across the whole board, across the whole of BCP, pretty much as cash cows to fill a financial hole in the council's finances. Some of the first year increases in Christchurch are 26%. It's just not fair. More than double the rate of inflation. And the increase is 170% over 5 years for some huts. It's just not realistic. The report says that over the 5 years of harmonisation, the council will be investing 4.4 million into beach hut seafront services, ancillary facilities, and the council's medium-term financial plan will benefit by 5.6 million. Well, I just wonder what that investment will be, because we're not actually told what it's going to be. I just wonder what confidence there is, I don't, in what this money will actually be spent on. We all recall the barbecues that were hundreds of thousands of pounds spent on them, and some of them haven't even got any power supplies. Nobody's actually saying what this money will be spent on, and it's a huge amount of money. But to quote in Appendix 3, you're actually saying that you're utilising beach huts as a catalyst for wider improvements to the seafront facilities and infrastructure. But I would just substitute the word catalyst for cash cows, as I said before. Just another example, people who buy their own beach hut in Mudderford may reportedly, in this report, expect to pay £25,000 in transfer fees in the future, up from £7,000. It's an increase of more than 250%. So all they want to see is a fair and equitable rent review. Nobody says there shouldn't be a rent review. Given the rising cost of living and inflation, and this would see probably in the order of 10%, let's say for the first year, and let's have a look at what can be done for the rest of the time. This isn't right how it is at the moment. They did suggest an alternative, which it seems to have been just dismissed out of hand. We can see there's a plan to raise money out of this, but they want firm commitments with plans as to what is going to actually be done with any extra money. For me, the proposals in the report are just not fair. Also, it seems to have been a bit of a secret operation as far as I'm concerned, and ward councillors are concerned, because we didn't know anything about it. Our residents started contacting us and saying, what on earth is happening here? And there's been no scrutiny of this either, which for me is a concern. It just seems to me that there's some sort of informal agreement to this report, and I'll be delighted actually if there's not a unanimous agreement to this, because so far all of the decisions today that has happened. I don't want this to be a tick box exercise, which I think it's heading that way, or that's just the way I see it at the moment. I hope you're going to be listening to what residents have to say across the whole of BCP. This is not just Christchurch. And the leader in one of the other reports actually said he believes decisions should be made locally. I heard that. And there are objections from across the whole of BCP to this, so please take note. Why would you want to alienate all our residents, or a lot of our residents, a huge proportion like this? So please, I ask you to reconsider this whole proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so then we've now got those responding online, which is Councillor Sandra Moore first, and then Andy Hadley. Sandra, hi, thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Leader. Well, first I want to declare that for the past year I have rented a beach hut in Poole on an annual lease, but I'm not here just to talk about myself. I'm here to represent local residents who, like me, rent a beach hut. As a former Poole councillor, I know Poole did a considerable amount of work reviewing and refreshing their beach hut waiting lists in the past. This reduced the size of the list and consequently the time you had to wait for a beach hut to become available. But I see from the report that Bournemouth froze their waiting list in 2017. We are presumably then going to have to go through a similar process to that undertaken in Poole. If we unfreeze the Bournemouth waiting list, we might well uncover all the glitches and hitches that were found in Poole, and the resulting work, together with implementing the proposals in this paper, is going to make life extremely difficult for all the officers involved. I think there's definitely a need to revisit the mix of casual huts available for short-term rentals. From personal experience, when previously renting huts in both Bournemouth and Poole, I have seen firsthand that a large number are not used and presumably not rented out, even through the busy periods of July and August, and that includes the week of the Air Festival, which really did surprise me. As my residents tell me, if there are such long or frozen waiting lists, why are all the beach huts not in use? On one hand, you have a waiting list. On the other, and at the same time, you have beach huts which are not being used. This is a ridiculous situation, and it does need to be addressed, as clearly there is something going wrong somewhere. I can also add from personal experience, when using my beach hut, I'm often asked how to go about renting a beach hut. People clearly have no idea how to rent one. And for me, there is an obvious need to improve the marketing of our beach huts. Two suggestions in this paper that I very much like. One is to provide Wi-Fi, and that's personal because I can't live without it. And the other is to change the subletting policies. Currently, some people completely abuse the existing policies because there is little or no enforcement, but some would like to sublet and would welcome being able to do so via a safe recommended website or app. And subletting would, of course, very much help some people afford the increased charges. And I do agree there is a need to increase investment in our beach huts and to harmonise the charges for all the beach huts across BCP. But this proposed increase in beach hut charges goes way beyond normal considerations and has the signs of being a cash raising, otherwise known as sweating the assets. A reactive strategy, which is clearly not sustainable in the long term, especially when the beach hut associations are sending out a strong warning message that this council is in danger of pricing out local people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Moore. Okay, now we move to Councillor Andy Hadley. Andy.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, the significant increase in cost for beach hut users at the time of general financial distress freezes out people on more limited incomes. Widening the use of the long-term leases further favours the residents with the most money to invest. Part of the benefits of the longer leases seem to be taken away by the VAT implications. And I think also extending the long leases may create difficulties for the council in future. The terms and conditions for annual rentals can be changed easily, it's in your paper, but longer leases are set at the outset in terms of the terms and conditions. With potentially challenging conditions in the future, if the cliffs become unstable, as they have at Camford Cliffs, or beach replenishment becomes more difficult or impossible as it gets more expensive to bring the sand ashore, or if the council wants to seek to flex the use of space or rebuilding beach hut segments, the longer leases will get in the way of all of that. Paragraph 30 talks about a new integrated IT system to administer the beach huts and also other venues, and that taking 2 years to develop a new bespoke system. And I saw in the statements from some of the beach hut owners the concern that they were being asked to fund that. But the transformation process was supposed to introduce solutions that would encompass the means to book things and would link to web access for the public at the front end and billing systems at the back end. If we keep reinventing these things for different services, then the costs of those are going to be significant. So I don't understand why the council really needs to reinvent the wheel specifically for beach huts. The issues of subletting and wear and tear, and again, it was covered by the previous speakers a bit, but I think there is something about making it easier for people to perhaps advise the council they don't need the beach hut for the next so many weeks, and perhaps the council taking on that role of remarketing the space. On the equalities implications, it highlights the mosaic analysis, highlights that a majority of tenants are from affluent demographics. Surely thinking back to the levelling up paper earlier, we should be offering more daily, weekly rentals to enable those of more modest income to have the chance to experience a place on the seafront. And within that, only 6 of the 3,700 huts are made available to the youth fostering and carers services, which seems a very token measure of supporting these essential users. Overall, these changes favour the better off, and those that will be able to stomach the very significant increases for some. I'd urge you to reconsider how to make the beach huts more accessible to those on a limited budget and fairer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I've got some statements of councillors who've had to leave the meeting, and I will go first to Councillor Mike Brooke. I don't have a beach hut myself, and so I have no vested interest, but I am making this representation not only on behalf of residents in my ward that have contacted me, but also those residents in Poole who would be impacted should the proposals be implemented without amendment. There are, I believe, 3 key issues involved. Firstly, the level of increases being proposed are excessive. While the baseline proposals of 10%, 10%, 5%, 5% and 5% might seem both reasonable and equitable at first sight, given the current levels of inflation, the cumulative picture is very different. When all the proposed changes to the charges are examined closely, it is clear that the increases are neither fair nor logical. In fact, they could be described as discriminatory. There are wide variations in increases across the different bands. For example, Band 2 and Band 4 have the lowest cumulative increases of 40.27 and 40.25 respectively, while band, and then there's no band, increases by 52.94%, band 7 by 129.74 and band 8 by exactly 100%. Such levels of increase and such variations cannot be justified. Secondly, it would appear that the beach huts are being used as a cash cow to help bail out the council at a time when it's facing potential bankruptcy. Which is not, anyway, I'll come back to that. Investment into the beach huts is set at about 20% of the net income over the next 5 years. While this might seem relatively significant, the fund for maintenance of beach huts represents a declining proportion of the investments. The current year's maintenance proportion is 54.64% of investment total. Next year's is set out at 34.3% and subsequent years around 29%. There are significant increases in investment to partnerships and commissions. Maintenance budgets should not represent a declining proportion of investment. Thirdly, the pricing system as well as the increases are discriminatory. This is shown in the mosaic and index of multiple deprivation data. At this time of cost of living crisis, such price increases as proposed can only add to the issues for a wider group of residents. It is likely there will be many who can no longer afford to rent their beach hut, thus depriving them of what for some is an important aid to their overall health and well-being. I therefore urge Cabinet to reject the proposals and refer back for a complete rethink. Okay, and I'm now going to respond just to a couple of the points in there. Effectively, there is a misunderstanding of the maintenance piece, because he's saying the maintenance proportion decreases over time. What it actually is the maintenance, it goes into the MTP at 1 year, and then there's a further increase in future years. Secondly, the councillor makes the statement completely unjustified that the council is facing potential bankruptcy, which is completely not true. We now have a surplus of £9 million in year. We have a balanced medium-term financial plan over the next 4 years. So we are, and the risk, the one risk we do maintain around the dedicated schools grant. We've now got 3 years of comfort from the government on that. So I'd urge the councillor to keep up. Okay, now I will move on to a statement from Councillor Vicky Stade on beach hut harmonisation. The work to harmonise beach hut terms and conditions is clearly necessary. The council persisting with unfair arrangements across many policy areas, including the inequity of Poole still not having food waste collections and the legacy issue of continuing to fund the Christmas lights in Bournemouth, needs to be resolved. However, this paper is not the solution. This paper is delivering a cash cow. Whilst it is good to see some of the additional income being directed at hut improvements, this represents a minority of the so-called service investments. Please consider amending this proposal by transferring the cost of IT into the transformation programme or funding it from a community infrastructure levy. If beach barbecues can be funded via this method, then I would expect it can justify including the cost of a new IT system. It is also slightly strange to see tenants funding the cost of marketing when the waiting list of existing residents is already several years long. This is just transferring costs onto tenants, and what evidence is there to support either additional staff or that professional advice on undertaking additional investment opportunities will actually benefit the tenants? The suggestion that we should either let the portfolio holder change the geographic base of our tenants or look to replace beach huts with alternative leisure facilities as per item H of the commercialisation paper is crazy. I'm also bemused by the findings of the Mosaic paper. This seems to make the case that too many of the hut tenants are affluent. Residents in my ward are generally homeowners and often well educated, but that does not make them rich. One resident said, "My beach hut has, through my working life and now into my older years, been my solace, a place of reflection and revitalisation. It was a lifesaver through my years in an extremely demanding and stressful job. As I walked down to the slope to the beach, I would feel a great weight lift from me. Now, as a 75-year-old pensioner on a fixed budget, it is becoming increasingly difficult to fund this small haven." Another said, "I'm probably more fortunate than many as I do have outside space at home. I know several people who live in 2 3-floor flats with a beach hut being their only outside space. Where does mental health and well-being come into your thoughts?" Another told me, "These increases will force pensioners like myself, many of whom rent the huts for the use of their extended families, to give up their huts, allowing only the more affluent amongst us to experience the joys of having a beach hut. We've always been constant users of our hut, together with my son and his wife and my grandson. Since my husband passed away in April 21, and now being 75 years of age, I use my beach hut as a haven of peace and enjoyment, as holiday travel is no longer something I can entertain. Most people who rent beach huts aren't rich people with money to spare. They are ordinary, hard-working or retired locals. Don't use beach hut tenants as a way of propping up council budgets, as it's not fair. These rises won't make the provision of huts more equitable. You won't suddenly see the Mosaic data show that those in more deprived areas suddenly find £3,000 to be able to rent a hut. I urge you to rethink, reduce the increases to match inflation for this year and a lower rate thereafter. And if that means having to freeze some rents to achieve harmonisation, so be it. You can do this by removing some of the costs of the tenants and commit to making all huts available to all residents in BCP, but only for those in BCP. And finally, we have a statement from Councillor May Haynes. I have received several representations from beach hut tenants in Poole expressing their objections to the proposed increase in beach hut fees over the next 5 years. Most of these representations have been forwarded to Councillor Anderson, the portfolio holder, so that he is aware of those objections. I've also received verbal representation on the matter expressing similar objections. While some tenants have welcomed the plan to reinvest £4.4 million to improve services, Appendix 1C indicates that £2.8 million will go towards maintenance, with the remaining used to fund non-maintenance activities. Paragraph 27 states, "We recognise there is a backlog in some areas and costs have also significantly increased, with the cost of refurbishment currently estimated to be up to £250,000 per block. It would seem that the allocated funds will only be able to cover 10 to 12 blocks of beach huts over the 5-year period. I have a resident that has a hut in Camberley Cliffs Chine, which is in price band 3, who had stated that in the 10 years or so they've rented their hut, there's only been one visible maintenance activity, where some huts had the fronts repainted. I have followed up with Seafront Services and was told that any further maintenance is pending funding being available. I would ask that the beach huts in this area be prioritised for maintenance in the coming year. This will provide some confidence that the reinvestment from the increased in fees is indeed being used as proposed. Cabinet members, I would ask that you give due consideration to the many views and concerns expressed by beach hut tenants. With the rise cost of living starting to bite into incomes for all our residents, non-essential expense and or what is deemed to be a luxury will be the most likely to be cut, which could be returning their beach hut keys or taking names off the waiting list. While there may be the view that there are a substantial number of people on the waiting list for huts in Poole, we need to be mindful not to price ourselves out of the market." Okay, so I thank all colleagues who have put into that discussion. I'm now going to go to our Cabinet colleagues, and first Councillor Mike Green and then Jude Butt. Mike.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'll be brief on this. We are lucky enough to be annual licence holders of a beach hut, and we thank the Deputy Monitoring Officer for the dispensation, which allows us to speak and to vote on this. But I do mean that we're lucky enough. We've had the annual licence for a little while, and I know for certain that if we were to choose to give up that beach hut tomorrow, there would be a dozen on the waiting list who would absolutely be jumping on it. So I listening to some of the deputations that came from colleagues just earlier, I would really want to ask that question: what really is fair and what is unfair? Because I think what is unfair for me is that, or what is unfair, is that I have, at the expense of the council taxpayer, broadly, the opportunity to rent something that everyone else, a lot of other people would want at a higher price. And I tell you what, if I was in one of those other places towards the east, where the cost of renting it was a third of what we pay, then there are going to be 1,000 people that would love to jump on that one if it became available. And I just do not think it is fair that we, amongst others, are getting something cheaper than the market would allow, which would then mean that there is this money available to fund the seafront for everyone. Not just my hut, not just the stretch of our huts or our block where our hut is, but everyone on the seafront will benefit if there is a fairer way where people pay closer to, not at a market rent, because I absolutely believe that even if we increased all the rents twice as far as this is suggesting here, that there would still be people who want it. Yeah, but we are at the moment a privileged bunch who have our huts when others don't, and when others suffer from lack of investment as a result of that. And I really do take offence to through the comment that came earlier that we are involved in a tick box exercise. Yes, it may be the case that we have unanimously voted for recommendations that have come through, but we've done that because we understand the paper. We've been through, we've listened to the debate, and we've understood it. So I find that really quite offensive. Let's look, and please stop muttering and talking over everyone, as we've been hearing over here right the way through. I decided not to point this out right at the beginning of the meeting, but it has been difficult for sometimes to concentrate on what's going on, because people, rather than moving outside to be able to have their private conversations, continue to sit in here. So I do not think that's fair. I do not think it's fair to talk about it's a tick box exercise, and I do not think it's fair that we privileged people should be able to have discount which costs everybody else in BCP and all of our visitors from having a better seafront. Thank you, Lee.
Very well said, thank you. Jude.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regrettably, I do not concur with much of what has been said with regard to this proposal. I have made it quite clear as it's run along about the perception and also about the fact of lack of appropriate and workable engagement. We've heard from all three of our beach hut owner, tenants, lessees, etc., groups, that they don't feel there's been appropriate consultation. They don't feel their skill sets have been taken on board to find a proper way forward. The practical harmonisation plans are not practical. The costed methodologies are ignored, which have been put forward by these good people. These people in our community are not idiots. They're accountants, they're bankers, they're all sorts of people with massive skill sets, and they are to a large extent overlooked and not taken into consideration, which is what we should be doing with regard to engagement. It's not a them and us, it's an us. Due process, I think, with regard to this has been odd and incredibly complex. We've had a very complex explanation from Councillor Anderson, which, though laudable, still complex. We've had further complex submissions from other councillors who have tried to make their point as salient as possible, but a lot of it's got lost in the ether because it's so complex. And I think that's my point. Engagement's got to be clear, it's got to be simple, and it's got to be everybody involved. Not this factions and back to sides again. We're back to the Keyhole Bridge. Well, we have one faction saying we want this, and another faction saying, well, we're going to do this. There's no meeting of minds. Talking about an open and shut case, well, this very much a case seems to have been shut. And when Councillor Green was talking about having a beach hut, which of course he's completely entitled, filling all the criterion, he said that if he gave his up, many would jump on the list. I don't doubt it, but many will be pushed off it too. And it's just those two spectrums that we really should be considering. We can't lump anybody in any one pot here because it's so mosaic. I think it's a terrible complex legacy. I had it as portfolio holder when I was cabinet member in Poole a few years ago. I'm afraid I can't support this item as it stands. I do support the harmonisation. I think it's well overdue, and the hardest thing, back to herding caterpillars again. But the way in which it's been processed has not been in a way which the public have felt engaged. The councillors haven't felt engaged, and it's key. We're 76 of us, we've got to work together. The tick box exercise, I make no comment on that. But if that's the feeling, if that's how people are feeling, if this report has made people feel resentful, then clearly we need to reiterate on this. And whether the paper is sound or not, representation's been made today. It's been made by the public, it's been made by the councillors. Please, cabinet members, please listen to what the public have to say and be flexible in your approach in this, and do consider the points put forward and start that conversation with the Beach Hut groups and the councillors. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll just come in briefly, and I think it's really interesting to listen to the submissions and the debate effectively. We're talking hearing a lot about the word fairness, and you know, that's very much where I see this paper coming, and what we're trying to do, you know, on it. In two elements really. One in terms of inflation, we've been really clear that we are in unprecedented pressure because of, you know, Putin's war in Ukraine and the cost of living crisis, which has put £55 million of extra costs into this authority over a two-year period. That we absolutely, the fair thing to do is to make sure where we're selling services, where we're giving a service and people are paying for it, those costs have to go up by, you know, at the very least inflation, or they're effectively being subsidised by the wider public, effectively, who are paying the council tax. And the other point around fairness is, and Councillor Butt, you know, explains it quite eloquently in terms of, you know, how complex this is. Well, it is too complex, and that's one of the reasons why we need to harmonise. And it is fair that, you know, it's not fair that the absolute disparity in terms of cost of beach huts. It's quite eye-opening for me as a beach hut in Branksome Chine, looking through the report and seeing actually how much more I was paying in Branksome Chine than there are in other areas. So, you know, I think that is not fair, and we need to you know, harmonise to make it less complex and fairer. And also, you know, and I thank Councillor Haynes for her submission and her comments. But talking, you know, about the lack of investment and the lack of maintenance, that's exactly the point. We haven't had the ability, we haven't had the funds at any point when I was a councillor in Borough of Poole, and obviously, you know, it feels it's probably similar across our stock across Bournemouth and Christchurch. We haven't had the funds to invest in these assets. So what do you want to do? Is it a circle to, you know, to the bottom, a downward spiral, lack of investment? No, what we're talking about, and across the piece here, is about, you know, genuine regeneration. You know, putting things in, having a real ambition for our seafront, ambition for our assets. So, you know, again, I think, you know, this is a means to do that, and I'm absolutely delighted that this isn't a cash cow in terms of all that money, you know, going into the MTFP. It's not. It's going into investing in the seafront for everybody to enjoy. One last point, Councillor Haynes talks about blocks and being £250,000 referenced in the report. I believe I'm right, and Councillor Anderson will correct me if I'm wrong. That was meant about blocks of toilets costing £250,000. So in terms of saying we'd only be able to do 10 or 12 blocks, that's not the case, because these are blocks of toilets, not blocks of beach huts. Okay, so, you know, I'm very happy to perhaps leave it there, and I'm not seeing anybody else wishing to speak, so perhaps I'll come up to Mark Anderson to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your comments, because you've covered most of the statements that have been made by some of the councillors, but I would like to pick up on one or two. Particularly, I'd like to pick up the comments by Councillors Devon and Councillor Phipps about Highcliffe and Friarcliff beach huts. It's quite interesting that we have a range of beach hut prices currently. Friarcliff is £770 per annum. If you were to go to Shore Road and take one of the premium huts, it's £5,725. That's a hell of a difference, quite frankly. And I think that the fact that we are asking the Friarcliff people to have an increase in £200 per annum for the next year, I think is very reasonable and very fair. I'd also like to pick up on the comment by Councillor Phipps about the Mudderford Spit increase. Well, actually, one of the reasons we're harmonising is because there are so many different transfer fees in Mudderford Spit. If, for instance, you are a Christchurch resident and you're buying the beach hut from your family, then yes, it is £7,785. But if the buyer isn't a Christchurch resident but is a member of the seller's family, it's £9,120. Alternatively, if the buyer is a Christchurch resident but not a member of the seller's family, it's £15,570. And then finally, If the buyer is either a Christchurch resident or a member of the seller's family, it's £18,315, and a an increase from £18,315 to £25,000 is not that much money considering the total size there. And we are looking at allowing residents across the whole of BCP to have access to beach huts, not just outsiders, which is what Christchurch seemed to do. So that, I think, answers those two questions. I would actually like to thank Councillor Sandra Moore for her comments. Her comments about the waiting lists I take on board, and I shall be making sure that we look into those, because I wasn't aware of the comments about the issues you had in Poole. So thank you for that. And I absolutely also agree with her about improving the marketing and the way we sublet some of the shorter rent beach huts. And so I thank her for pointing that out to me in the suggestion of a phone app, which I think is a very good idea, and it will give some security to the beach hut owners who want to look at. It's one of the things I have been talking to the staff about, but I will make sure I continue on that. So thank you to Councillor Moore for that comment. But the other comments, I think you've covered very well, Leader, so I will leave them at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody showing, and we've summed up there, so I'll move to the vote now. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so that leaves us to move on to agenda item 14, which is the externalisation of the Russell Coates Art Gallery and Museum. Come to Councillor Dunlop, Bev.
Thank you, Leader. The paper before you concerns the externalisation of the Russell Coates Art Gallery and Museum, and I wish to state very clearly the reason for the recommendations within it are to safeguard this priceless piece of history in the longer term. The Gallery Museum is an outstanding collection of art and artefacts collected by the Russell Coates and gifted in trust to the people of Bournemouth with the council as caretakers, if you will. Although well-intentioned, over the years and through various iterations, we've arrived at a charity with the council being the sole trustee. The current arrangement means that history and art are competing for funds directly with council services, and this is not in the best interests of the museum. In order for us to protect this beautiful building and amazing collections, a change in the governance model is crucial to preserve this very important part of local history and culture. It is really a very exciting moment, and it will establish an active and engaged board of directors who will drive the strategic objectives and fundraising efforts. It's fair to say it's been a long time getting to this point. I am not the first portfolio holder who has sought to realise the ambition of the management committee to externalise the Russell Coates to ensure its bright future. I do hope, however, that I'm the last. The proposals before you will ensure the survival of the museum, though it can be enjoyed by future generations, and the building and collection cared for by a team of dedicated experts. I'm not one of those experts, Leader, but online we do have Sarah Newman, the museum manager, who will be happy to answer any questions on any detail of the complexity of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beverly. And I come now to Councillor Jane Kelly to second. Jane.
Thank you very much, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Dunlop, for your introduction to this paper. Yes, I was for a short time actually sitting on the management board of the Russell Coates, and I know how dedicated, how enthusiastic, and so knowledgeable are the staff of the museum, and how much they want it to thrive. And they know what's good for it. Things change over the years, don't they? And a management model that may be right in the beginning isn't right forever. And I do think that we need to move to the model that is proposed here. And so I really welcome the paper and want to second it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First we'll move to see if any of, I've got Councillor Andy Hadley to come first. Andy.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I spent quite some time visiting the gallery, meeting with Sarah, museum manager, and the chair of their engagement committee to understand the issues, because I haven't been one of the councillors on the board of the organisation. I do find it really surprising that the museum can't attract lottery funding whilst connected with the council, whereas the Poole Museum has obviously won several very substantial grants. It's clear there's been very significant underinvestment over many years in the basic structure of the Russell Coats, and I saw that for myself, and constraints on them for the freedom to operate. Having read the papers, I'm concerned the arrangements seek both independence alongside significant ongoing financial support for the council, and we need to tread that balance very carefully. The challenge seems to come from the Bournemouth Borough Council Act of 1985. It's really ironic, given that the Russell Coates family gave their home and eclectic art collection to the town, that the council hasn't found a way to properly look after it internally. But we should have a raised ambition for culture, and I think it does seem that it's right for this museum. I don't think by extension it's necessarily right for the other museums, and I think they are very different, and I think that was clear from my visit. So I think this is the best of where we are from where we are, I think, and it's a complicated situation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other members show. So, Councillor Dunlop, would you like to respond, and then we'll take that to the vote.
I think that the point that Councillor Hadley made is actually quite important, that there isn't a one-size-fits-all with museums, and we are handling each museum in a different way, and this is the right way forward for the Russell Coates. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd absolutely agree with all parts of that. Okay, so let's take that to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. So that moves us on to agenda item 15, urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive, which I believe there are none. Oh, sorry, apologies.
Sorry, Leader, we realised after the briefing that there is one, which was the appointment of Pat Hayes as a non-executive director on BCP Future Places.
Yes, great. And we've got the next board meeting of Future Places, I believe, tomorrow. So, Anna, just as a point, then with that very important and great recruitment, then I will be coming off the board of BCP Future Places, so we can arrange that now, as we planned. Okay, so then we move to agenda item 6, which is a cabinet forward plan, which it's my duty to say it's been recently published. So please take a look at that. And last thing is to thank everybody for what has been a very long but very important meeting. Thanks people for their patience, and have a happy Christmas. Yeah, absolutely. Cheers. Bye bye.